Hey there, tonight we're diving into the mythology of ancient Norse gods. What you're about to discover includes a mischievous trickster and a world tree that binds realms in a way you might not expect. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights, or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In the vast, snow-swept landscapes of Scandinavia, where frost giants might just be lurking behind every fjord, the Norsemen spun tales as wild and woolly as their winters. Their mythology kicks off with a cosmic bang, not a big bang, but more of a frost and flame collision that would make even the most die-hard sci-fi fan raise an eyebrow. Meet the realm of Hijinks, a yawning abyss that somehow managed to be both icy and fiery. It was the original odd couple, and from this unlikely duo sprang the universe, or so the Norse believed. From the chaos of Hijinks, Ymir, the first being, emerged. Now, Ymir was no mere mortal, he was a frost giant. But don't let the name fool you into thinking he was just a really big ice cube. Ymir was as complex as they come, sprouting new life from his armpits and, drumroll, please, his legs. Yes, you heard that right. In this mythological family tree, hygiene clearly wasn't a priority. Fast forward to later, and Ymir meets his end at the hands of three brothers, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These guys didn't just dispose of Ymir, they recycled him. With a level of resourcefulness worthy of a modern sustainability award, they constructed the world from his remains. His flesh became the earth, his bones the mountains, his blood the seas, and his skull the sky. Talk about zero waste. But it gets even weirder. His eyebrows were used to create Midgard, the realm of humans. Browsing through history has never been so literal. The 9 worlds in Norse mythology are a fascinating mishmash of realms connected by Yggdrasil, the world tree. Picture a mighty ash tree that could put the tallest skyscrapers to shame. This tree is the Norse Google Maps, linking realms like Asgard, home of the gods, Midgard, where humans dwell, and Niflheim, an icy underworld that's not exactly a winter wonderland. There's also Jotunheim, the land of the giants, which sounds like a place with a severe overpopulation problem. In the Norse cosmos, everything is interconnected, with Yggdrasil's roots entangling the worlds like a cosmic family reunion gone awry. Asgard, the penthouse suite of the 9 worlds, is where Odin, the All-Father, sits on his high horse, or rather, his 8-legged steed, Sleipnir. Odin's the top dog here, but also something of a mystery wrapped in a riddle wrapped in a cloak. He sacrificed an eye for wisdom, a decision that, while hardcore, suggests he might not have had the best ophthalmologist. His sons, Thor and Loki, are household names today, thanks in no small part to Marvel's cinematic universe. But forget the capes and spandex. The real Thor wielded Mjolnir, a hammer so mighty it could topple mountains, and conveniently return like a boomerang. As for Loki, the so-called god of mischief, let's just say he was less about harmless pranks and more about catastrophic chaos. The Norse god's family tree is a tangled mess that would give any genealogist nightmares. Odin's wife Frigg is the queen consort, a wise goddess who knows everyone's fate but keeps it to herself. Their sons include Baldur, the beautiful and beloved god, whose death was the Norse version of a soap opera tragedy. Then there's Tyr, the one-handed god of war who lost his limb to Fenrir, a wolf with an appetite for destruction, and not just metaphorically. Now, if all this sounds a bit like a mythological soap opera, you wouldn't be wrong. The Norse gods were a dysfunctional family long before it was fashionable. They bickered, fought, and occasionally wreaked havoc across the cosmos. Yet, despite their divine status, they were remarkably human, full of flaws, egos, and strangely relatable quirks. This makes them perfect fodder for modern adaptations, from comic books to blockbuster movies. But while pop culture often paints them as superheroes, the original tales reveal deities with more in common with today's reality TV stars than you'd expect. Of course, Norse mythology isn't just about the gods' antics. It also offers a glimpse into how the Norse understood their world, a place of harsh landscapes and unpredictable elements. The myths reflect the Scandinavian environment, where survival often depended on understanding and appeasing the natural and supernatural forces at play. In a world where winter could last longer than a binge-watch session, the stories served as both entertainment and spiritual guidance. They explained the unexplainable and provided a framework for understanding human existence in an often unforgiving world. As we dive deeper into Norse mythology, it's essential to remember that these stories weren't just fairy tales. They were a lens through which the Norse viewed their reality, a way to make sense of life's chaos. The 9 worlds and their inhabitants were as vibrant and unpredictable as the people who told their tales. They remind us that, whether dealing with frost giants or modern-day dilemmas, the human spirit is resilient, resourceful, and occasionally a little bit mischievous. The Norse myths, with their vivid imagery and larger-than-life characters, acted as a cultural GPS for the Viking Age. But let's zero in on Odin, the All-Father, the head honcho of the divine hierarchy, who was as enigmatic as a Norse riddle. If there was a LinkedIn for gods, Odin's profile would be wildly eclectic: war god, wisdom seeker, poetry lover, and part-time wanderer. He wasn't just the CEO of Asgard Inc. He was a complex character whose thirst for knowledge was rivaled only by his penchant for dramatic self-sacrifice. Take, for instance, his infamous quest for wisdom that led him to Mimir's well. Imagine being so desperate for insight that you'd willingly trade an eyeball for a sip of wisdom water. Talk about a high-stakes trade-off. This wasn't just a casual stroll to the water cooler. It was a deliberate act that underscored a belief that knowledge was worth any price, even partial blindness. Now, before you label Odin as the original overachiever, consider the context. In a world as unpredictable as the Norse one, wisdom wasn't just golden. It was essential for survival and leadership. Odin's wisdom quest wasn't just about personal growth. It reflected the economic and political realities of the Norse world. In the Viking Age, leaders weren't just expected to be fierce warriors. They needed the strategic acumen to navigate a society where alliances could shift as quickly as a Norwegian weather forecast. The Norse valued cunning and foresight, qualities that Odin embodied. His actions mirrored the leadership style of Viking chieftains who had to balance brute strength with savvy negotiation skills. Forget about boardroom battles. This was about ensuring your clan's survival and prosperity in a harsh and competitive environment. Now, let's talk about Odin's unique character quirks. Unlike the one-dimensional deities of some other mythologies, Odin was a god of contradictions. He was both a revered king and a mysterious wanderer, often disguising himself to walk among humans. This duality made him relatable and revered, a god who could dine in Valhalla one day and roam the earth incognito the next. Odin's penchant for disguises wasn't just about incognito bar hopping. It reflected a belief in the value of perspective. By experiencing the world from different angles, Odin gathered insights that kept him a step ahead of his rivals. And let's face it, there were plenty. The myth of Odin hanging himself from Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 nights to gain runic knowledge, is another testament to his complex character. Yes, he hung himself, literally putting the sacrifice in self-sacrifice. The runes were seen as powerful symbols, encapsulating the mysteries of the cosmos and providing magical insight. In Odin, the Norse saw a leader willing to endure extreme self-inflicted ordeals for the sake of wisdom and power. This wasn't just spiritual masochism. It was a strategic investment in the future. In a society where mystical symbols were as crucial as a sturdy longship, rune knowledge could be the difference between victory and defeat. Odin's character also mirrored the political landscape of Viking times, a period when leaders had to be adaptable and resourceful. The Norse world wasn't governed by centralized power, but by a loose coalition of chieftains and warlords. This decentralized structure made charisma and cunning as vital as physical prowess. Odin, with his unpredictable nature and cunning strategies, embodied the ideal Viking leader, one who could navigate both the battlefield and the banquet hall with equal skill. Economically, the Norse society was driven by trade, raids, and agriculture, a trifecta that required shrewd management and an eye for opportunity. Odin's wisdom quests and shape-shifting antics can be seen as metaphors for the dynamic and often precarious life in Viking society. The Norse weren't just marauding warriors. They were traders who established routes from the Volga to the Seine. They understood that success depended not just on strength, but on adaptability and alliances. Odin, with his multifaceted personality, was the perfect deity for people who thrived on both conquest and commerce. In the mythic tales, Odin's actions often reflect the economic and social intricacies of his time. His journeys, sacrifices, and disguises highlight the Norse belief in the importance of flexibility and intelligence. It wasn't enough to be a one-trick pony, or in Odin's case, a one-eyed god. To lead effectively, one had to be as versatile as the environment demanded. In a world where a shift in weather could mean the difference between feast and famine, Odin's adaptability mirrored the Norse spirit of resilience. As we delve deeper into Odin's saga, it's clear that his myths are more than just stories of divine drama. They offer a lens through which we can understand the values and priorities of the Norse people. Whether as a god of war, a seeker of wisdom, or a cunning wanderer, Odin encapsulated the complexities of leadership in a time when the stakes were as high as the towering peaks of the Scandinavian landscape. His tales remind us that the pursuit of knowledge and adaptability are timeless virtues, relevant even in our modern world where the challenges may have changed, but the human quest for understanding and mastery remains the same. And so, Odin stands as a testament to the Norse belief in the power of wisdom, the necessity of sacrifice, and the value of perspective. His stories continue to resonate, not just as relics of a bygone era, but as enduring lessons in the art of leadership and the pursuit of knowledge. As we move forward in our exploration of Norse mythology, we'll see how these themes play out across the stories of other gods and the mortals who worship them. But for now, let's leave Odin to his ruminations and prepare for the next chapter in this epic saga. Speaking of complex characters with a penchant for drama, let's shift our gaze to Thor, the Norse god of thunder. Forget the cape and chiseled abs from the Marvel movies for a moment. The real Thor was a bit more rugged and a lot more grounded. Picture a god who could easily pass for a Viking strongman, complete with a red beard, a booming voice, and a love for drinking competitions. Because what's a deity without a good mead-induced brawl every now and then? Thor was a protector of both gods and humans, a cosmic bouncer who kept the peace by whacking enemies with his trusty hammer, Mjolnir. Now, Mjolnir wasn't your average hardware store variety. This was the mother of all hammers, capable of flattening mountains and smashing giants, yet compact enough to return to Thor's hand like a faithful Labrador. It's said that Mjolnir was so heavy, only Thor could wield it with ease. Talk about a bespoke weapon. The cultural significance of Mjolnir extended far beyond its utility as a battering tool. In Viking society, this hammer symbolized protection and power, embodying the Norse ideal of strength and courage. Much like a modern-day security badge, Mjolnir was a mark of divine authority. Viking warriors, who knew their way around a battlefield as well as they did a mead hall, would wear Mjolnir pendants as amulets. These miniature hammers were the ancient equivalent of a lucky rabbit's foot, believed to safeguard the wearer in both combat and everyday life. Now, let's take a moment to contrast Thor's epic feats with the day-to-day grind of Norse life. While Thor was off battling frost giants and engaging in celestial smackdowns, the average Norseman was more concerned with the less glamorous, albeit equally challenging, tasks of survival. Life in the Viking Age was a mix of farming, fishing, and of course, raiding. Because why grow your own when you can just take someone else's right? The Norse economy was built on trade and warfare, a fact that made Thor's protective image all the more appealing. Imagine a world where a bad harvest could mean the difference between feasting and famine. It's no wonder the Norse looked to Thor for a little divine intervention. Thor's legend wasn't just about brute strength, it was also peppered with comedic elements. Take the time he had to dress as a bride to retrieve Mjolnir from the giant Thrym who had stolen the hammer. Talk about a plot twist. This wasn't just a gender-bending escapade. It was a story that highlighted Thor's willingness to go to any lengths, however absurd, to maintain the cosmic order. It showed the Norse that even their mightiest god wasn't above a bit of cross-dressing if it meant getting the job done. The Norse myths, with their wild tales and colourful characters, offered a form of escapism for a culture accustomed to harsh realities. When your daily life involves navigating treacherous seas or fending off rival clans, a story about a thunder god in a bridal gown provides a much-needed chuckle. It's the ancient equivalent of binge-watching a sitcom after a tough day, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, Humor and resilience go hand in hand. But let's not forget the economic undertones of these myths. The Norse were savvy traders who established routes from the far reaches of Russia to the coastlines of North America. Mjolnir's symbolism as a protector wasn't just spiritual. It had practical implications in a world where trade routes were as perilous as they were profitable. In a society that valued both martial prowess and economic acumen, Thor's tales served as a rallying cry for strength and bravery in all endeavors. So, how did these myths shape the Norse worldview? They provided a framework for understanding life's unpredictability. Thor's willingness to confront chaos head-on reflected the Norse attitude toward adversity. These stories weren't just entertaining, they were instructional, offering lessons in courage, resourcefulness, and the importance of laughter in the face of danger. As we delve deeper into Thor's saga, it's clear that his role as a comic figure and protector was more than just mythological fluff. It was a testament to the Norse belief in the power of strength tempered with humor, a combination as potent as a thunderbolt. Thor's legend continues to captivate us, not just as a story of divine heroics, but as a reflection of the human spirit's capacity to endure, adapt, and occasionally laugh in the face of overwhelming odds. In the next part of our saga, we'll explore how these mythological themes weave into the broader tapestry of Norse life, examining how the gods' tales influenced everything from social norms to economic practices. For now, let's raise a horn of mead to Thor, the god who taught us that even the mightiest warriors can have a sense of humor, and that sometimes the best way to deal with a giant problem is to hit it with a hammer. As we pivot from the thunderous antics of Thor, let's dive into the murky waters of the Norse pantheon's resident troublemaker, Loki. This guy is the original chaos agent, the mythological equivalent of that one friend who always suggests could possibly go wrong, just before everything does. Loki's resume as the trickster god is as colorful as it is chaotic. He wasn't just a minor prankster. He was the Norse Shakespeare of shenanigans, a master of mischief with an uncanny ability to stir the pot, and then sit back to watch the fireworks. But before we paint him as just a celestial-class clown, let's delve into the social and moral implications of Loki's antics and what they say about Viking values. Now, the Norse weren't just about raiding and mead drinking. They had a complex societal code that valued honor, loyalty, and, surprisingly, cunning. Loki's role in the pantheon was a reflection of these values. His cleverness and ability to manipulate situations resonated with a culture that revered strategic thinking as much as brute strength. You see, in a world where survival wasn't guaranteed, the ability to outwit an opponent was as valuable as a sturdy axe. Take, for example, the infamous tale of Loki and the building of Asgard's walls. The gods needed fortifications to keep out pesky giants. Think of it as the ultimate neighborhood watch program. A builder, possibly a giant in disguise, offered to complete the project in an implausibly short time and demanded Freyja, the sun, and the moon as payment. Cue Loki, who suggested they accept the deal but set a condition. The work must be finished in a single winter. When the builder almost pulled it off, thanks to his supernatural steed, Svadilfari, Loki had to resort to extreme measures, transforming into a mare and leading the stallion away to a horse around. 9 months later, Loki gave birth to Sleipnir, Odin's 8-legged horse. Yes, you read that right. Loki became a mother, adding another layer to his convoluted character. This tale might seem whimsical, but it underscores a critical aspect of Norse society, the importance of cunning and adaptability. Loki's ability to think on his feet, sometimes quite literally, highlighted the Norse understanding of chaos and order. In their world, chaos wasn't the enemy. It was a force to be understood, and when necessary, harnessed. Loki's antics served as cautionary tales, warning of the unpredictable nature of chaos, while acknowledging the necessity of cleverness in a harsh environment. The moral implications of Loki's tricks were equally complex. While his actions often led to trouble, they also prompted the gods to adapt and grow, much like how adversity forces innovation in human societies. The Norse saw value in the disruption of the status quo, believing that through chaos came growth and renewal. This duality is reflected in their myths, where Loki's antics often result in unintended benefits, albeit through a maze of misfortune. But let's not sugarcoat it. Loki wasn't always the misunderstood anti-hero. His darker side, as seen in the myth of Baldur's death, reveals the consequences of unchecked chaos. Baldur, the beloved god whose death was foretold in dreams, was invulnerable to all things except mistletoe. Loki, ever the opportunist, crafted a dart from the plant and tricked the blind god harder into throwing it, killing Baldur. This act of treachery catalyzed the chain of events leading to Ragnarok, the Norse apocalypse. Here, Loki's role transcends mere mischief, embodying the destructive potential of chaos when it spirals beyond control. In modern terms, Loki could be likened to the anti-heroes of today's entertainment landscape. Think of him as the Walter White of Norse mythology, a character whose questionable morals and cunning tactics both intrigue and disturb. These figures captivate us because they reflect the complexities of human nature, embodying both our darker impulses and our potential for redemption. Loki's narrative, much like modern anti-heroes, forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our societies. His stories challenge the simplistic dichotomy of good versus evil, revealing instead a spectrum of grey, where motives and outcomes are murkier than a Scandinavian fjord in winter. This complexity resonates with us today, where moral ambiguity is often the rule rather than the exception. Economically, Loki's tales mirror the realities of a society that thrived on both trade and conquest. The Norse were no strangers to the unpredictability of markets and the necessity of strategic deception in negotiations. Loki's cunning and adaptability could be seen as metaphors for the economic acumen required to navigate the volatile world of Viking trade routes and raids. In essence, Loki's antics served as both entertainment and instruction, much like a dark comedy that leaves you pondering the punchlines long after the credits roll. His presence in Norse mythology wasn't just to stir up trouble. It was to remind the Norse of the delicate balance between chaos and order, and the need to adapt to ever-changing circumstances. As we continue to explore the pantheon, Loki stands out as a testament to the Norse belief in the value of cunning and the necessity of understanding chaos. His tales are a reminder that the line between order and disorder is razor-thin, and that survival often depends on the ability to navigate the unpredictable with wit and wisdom. In our next exploration, we'll delve deeper into how these themes of chaos, order, and adaptability weave through the fabric of Norse society and mythology, influencing everything from societal norms to economic practices. But for now, let's leave Loki to his machinations and prepare for the next chapter in this epic saga, where the stakes are as high as the peaks of the Scandinavian mountains. As the Norse myths roll toward their grand finale, it's time to tackle the ultimate cosmic showdown, Ragnarok. This apocalyptic tale is the Norse equivalent of the universe hitting the reset button, complete with gods duking it out, the world burning, and, spoiler alert, a phoenix-like rebirth. But before you start imagining Thor and Loki in some sort of mythological WWE smackdown, let's dig into the nitty-gritty of this epic conclusion. Ragnarok wasn't just an end-of-the-world scenario. It was a tale of fate, destiny, and the cyclical nature of the cosmos. The Norse believed in a concept called weird, which is like fate's more unpredictable cousin. Less, your horoscope said this would happen, and more, life's a chaotic soup, and you're just a noodle. In this worldview, Ragnarok wasn't just an apocalypse. It was an inevitable transformation, a cosmic reset that every Viking knew was coming, much like winter in Game of Thrones. The events of Ragnarok are as intense as they are inevitable. Picture this. Loki breaks free from his chains, leading an army of the disgruntled dead, while Fenrir, that oversized furball of doom, finally takes his bite out of Odin. Meanwhile, the seas rise as Jörmungandr, the world serpent, makes his grand reappearance, spewing venom like a mythological fire extinguisher gone rogue. It's chaos on an epic scale, but that's kind of the point. The Norse didn't sugarcoat the end times. They embraced the chaos as part of life's grand tapestry. But why did these myths matter so much to the Norse? Well, for starters, they reflected the harsh realities of their environment. Living in a world where a bad storm could wipe out your village meant coming to terms with nature's unpredictability. Ragnarok was the ultimate embodiment of this unpredictability, a reminder that even the gods weren't immune to fate's whims. In a way, it provided comfort, a narrative that said, hey, even the all-powerful have their bad days. For a society that thrived on both conquest and survival, this was oddly reassuring. Economically speaking, the myth of Ragnarök also mirrored the volatile nature of the Viking world. The Norse were traders as much as they were raiders, and their livelihood depended on navigating the fickle currents of both sea and market. Just as Ragnarök promised destruction and renewal, the Norse economy was a cycle of boom and bust, driven by the whims of weather, warfare, and trade. Yet, despite its destructive nature, Ragnarök wasn't just about the end. It was about what came after. The Norse didn't just hit the cosmic reset and leave it at that. They imagined a world reborn, a fresh start where new gods would rise, and life would begin anew. It's like the ultimate, don't worry, we'll rebuild sentiment, where the ashes of the old world fertilize the soil for new beginnings. This theme of renewal is something we see echoed in modern narratives about apocalypse and rebirth. Whether it's post-apocalyptic films or dystopian novels, there's always that glimmer of hope, the idea that humanity will find a way to rebuild. Ragnarök taps into this universal narrative, reminding us that destruction isn't the end, but a necessary prelude to rebirth. It's like the Norse knew that even in the darkest times, there's a chance for a new dawn, albeit one that might involve fewer frost giants. In the end, Ragnarök serves as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope. It's a reminder that change, however terrifying, is a part of life's cycle. For the Norse, who faced the relentless challenges of their environment, this myth provided both entertainment and moral guidance, a narrative that reflected their understanding of the world's unpredictability. It's like a Viking-era self-help book, reminding them to embrace change and find strength in renewal. The legacy of Ragnarök and Norse mythology as a whole continues to resonate with us today. These stories, with their vivid imagery and complex characters, offer a lens through which we can explore the human condition. They reveal that even in a world of chaos and uncertainty, there is a thread of continuity, a belief in the resilience of life and the possibility of new beginnings. As we close this chapter on the Norse gods, it's clear that their myths are more than just tales of divine drama. They are reflections of the human spirit, embodying the complexities of fate, the inevitability of change, and the enduring hope for renewal. So, next time you hear thunder rumbling in the distance, maybe spare a thought for Thor, Odin, and the rest of the Norse pantheon. After all, their stories remind us that even in the face of apocalypse, there's always room for a fresh start, and maybe a bit of mischief along the way. In the heart of southern Africa, where the landscape is as mysterious as the stories it conceals, lie the ruins of great Zimbabwe. These stones don't just sit there like ancient paperweights. They whisper tales of a once mighty kingdom that thrived between 1100 and 1450 AD. Picture this: colossal stone walls soaring up to 11 meters high and stretching over 250 meters in circumference. And guess what? Not a single drop of mortar was used. If these walls could talk, they'd probably say, "Who needs cement when you've got precision?" Now, let's talk geography. Great Zimbabwe is nestled in the southeastern hills of Zimbabwe, a country that today sits snugly between Botswana and Mozambique. Back in the day, this wasn't just some random spot on the map. It was the epicenter of a thriving trade network. Gold, ivory, and all sorts of exotic goods flowed through here like a 14th century Amazon prime, minus the 2-day shipping. The city was strategically positioned to tap into trade routes that connected the African interior with the Swahili coast on the Indian Ocean. When European explorers first stumbled upon these ruins, they were like, "Africans built this." No way. It's almost as if these guys read the wrong script from a history book that forgot to mention Africa's rich architectural legacy. In the 19th century, explorers and archaeologists, armed with a blend of curiosity and condescension, arrived with their own set of biases. They couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that indigenous Africans could have constructed such monumental stone structures. It was like telling them their GPS was off by a couple of continents. Cue the conspiracy theories. Some folks insisted these ruins were the work of ancient Phoenicians, or maybe the lost tribe of Israel had popped over for a bit of stone masonry. Because, heaven forbid that the locals might have had the skills to stack rocks with such finesse. In reality, the people of Great Zimbabwe were master builders, using a technique known as dry stone walling. This method doesn't rely on mortar, but uses carefully shaped stones that fit together like a geological jigsaw puzzle. The construction of Great Zimbabwe required not just architectural know-how, but also a keen understanding of the landscape. The builders meticulously selected granite from nearby hills, ensuring the stones were flat enough to stack securely. This was no fly-by-night operation. It was a massive undertaking that demanded labor, resources, and, dare we say, a bit of architectural swagger. The ruins themselves are split into three main areas: the hill complex, the great enclosure, and the valley ruins. The hill complex, perched on a rocky outcrop, was likely a royal residence with commanding views of the surrounding plains. Then there's the great enclosure, the largest ancient structure south of the Sahara. This isn't just a pile of rocks. It's a testament to the ambition and organizational prowess of its builders. The outer wall alone is about 250 meters long, with an inner wall that creates a narrow passage, a design feature that's still a head-scratcher for archaeologists today. As for the valley ruins, these were the living quarters for the elite and their entourage. Imagine a bustling city, alive with craftsmen, traders, and farmers. Great Zimbabwe was home to an estimated 18,000 people at its peak. That's more than twice the seating capacity of Madison Square Garden. It was a melting pot of cultures and ideas, a place where the local Shona people interacted with traders from as far afield as China and Persia. But let's not romanticize too much. Life in Great Zimbabwe wasn't all grandeur and gold. It was also a place of political intrigue and power struggles. The rulers of Great Zimbabwe wielded considerable influence, controlling trade routes and accumulating wealth. This wasn't just a stone city. It was the nerve center of a vast trading empire. The kingdom's prosperity was deeply tied to its strategic location and the flow of goods. Gold from the region fueled not only local economies, but also the coffers of distant empires. Yet, despite its prominence, the reasons behind Great Zimbabwe's decline remained shrouded in mystery. By the mid-15th century, the city was abandoned, its population dispersing to smaller settlements. Some historians suggest that environmental factors like overgrazing and deforestation played a role. Others point to shifts in trade routes or internal power struggles. Whatever the cause, the fall of Great Zimbabwe marked the end of an era, leaving behind ruins that continue to puzzle and inspire. In the centuries that followed, the ruins became the stuff of legend, fueling both scholarly debate and wild speculation. Even today, the allure of Great Zimbabwe captures the imagination, drawing visitors from around the globe. It's a place where the past and present collide, where history is etched into every stone. The legacy of Great Zimbabwe is a reminder that Africa's history is as layered and complex as the continent itself. And while we may not have all the answers about this ancient kingdom, one thing's for sure: those stones aren't going anywhere. So, as the dust settles on the abandoned stones of Great Zimbabwe, let's pivot and peek behind the curtain at what made this kingdom tick economically. Picture a place not just bustling with life, but buzzing with the ceaseless hum of commerce. This wasn't your average medieval backwater. Great Zimbabwe was an economic powerhouse, a Wall Street before Wall Street was cool. But how did this inland city pull off such a feat without the luxury of a GPS or Google Translate? The secret source of Great Zimbabwe's success was its role as a trade hub, strategically positioned to connect the African interior with the wider world. Imagine a web of trade routes stretching all the way to China and the Middle East, with Great Zimbabwe at its heart. These routes weren't just dusty trails beaten by traders on foot. They were veins pulsing with gold, ivory, and cattle. Gold was the bling of choice, mined from the rich veins of the Zimbabwe plateau. During its heyday, Great Zimbabwe was like the Fort Knox of the medieval world, with an estimated 40% of the world's gold passing through its hands. This wasn't just a small-scale operation, either. We're talking about millions of ounces of gold, enough to make any modern hedge fund manager salivate. And then there was ivory, the white gold of the animal kingdom. Elephants roamed the African plains in vast numbers, and their tusks were prized commodities, coveted by traders from as far away as Arabia and India. While today we rightly cringe at the thought of ivory trade, back then it was a booming business, a trade that helped fuel the economic engine of Great Zimbabwe. But let's not forget the cattle. These weren't just walking hamburgers. They were the currency of choice, a status symbol, and a source of wealth. Owning cattle was like having a diversified stock portfolio, providing milk, meat, and leather, and even serving as a kind of four-legged ATM. The more cattle you had, the more clout you wielded in the local economy. It was a bovine bonanza, a horned hedge against economic downturns. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Archaeological finds at Great Zimbabwe have unearthed a treasure trove of exotic goods that paint a vivid picture of this ancient trade network. Chinese porcelain and Arabian glass have been found amongst the ruins, tangible evidence of the city's far-flung connections. These weren't just knickknacks picked up on a whim. They were high-status items, the medieval equivalent of a Rolex or a Louis Vuitton handbag. But how did these goods make their way to Zimbabwe, a landlocked city miles from the nearest ocean? Without the benefit of a DHL express service, trade relied on an intricate network of routes that wove through deserts, forests, and savannas. Traders carried their wares overland to the Swahili coast, where they were loaded onto dhows and shipped across the Indian Ocean. It was a logistics operation that would make even Amazon's supply chain look like child's play. Imagine, if you will, the sheer audacity of these traders. They crossed thousands of miles, braved hostile terrain, and navigated by the stars, all in pursuit of profit. And they did it all without the help of a smartphone or a weather app. It's a testament to human ingenuity, a reminder that commerce has always been a driving force in history, long before the invention of the stock market or the credit card. Yet, as we marvel at the scale of this ancient trade network, we must also question the logistics of it all. How exactly did traders coordinate such extensive trade routes without modern technology? How did they ensure the safe passage of goods across such vast distances? And how did they communicate with one another, given the myriad of languages and cultures involved? These are questions that continue to puzzle historians, but one thing's for sure. The people of Great Zimbabwe were savvy operators, masters of the trade game who knew how to leverage their strategic position to maximum effect. They weren't just passive players in the global economy. They were active participants, shaping and being shaped by the forces of trade. And let's not forget the darker side of this economic success. The wealth generated by trade wasn't evenly distributed. It was concentrated in the hands of the elite, the rulers who controlled the flow of goods and reaped the rewards. This was an economy built on inequality, a society where wealth and power were inextricably linked. So, as we ponder the economic engine of Great Zimbabwe, we must also acknowledge the social and political dynamics at play. This was a kingdom built on commerce, but it was also a kingdom of contrasts, a place where the riches of trade coexisted with the realities of power and privilege. In the end, the story of Great Zimbabwe is a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems, a complex tapestry woven from threads of ambition, innovation, and exploitation. And as we continue to explore this ancient kingdom, we can be sure that there are more surprises waiting to be uncovered in the stones of Great Zimbabwe. And as we continue to unravel the story of Great Zimbabwe, let's talk about the folks who ran the show, the Shona people. Now, if you're imagining everyone living in equal harmony, basking in the glow of communal wealth, hold that thought. The reality was more Game of Thrones than Sesame Street. The Shona society was a pyramid, and at the top sat the elite class, who lived in stone houses that practically screamed status symbol, while the commoners made do with mud huts. The elite weren't just sitting pretty in their stone fortresses, sipping on whatever passed for a medieval cocktail. These were the movers and shakers, the power brokers who controlled the flow of trade, and by extension, wealth. They were the ones who could afford to drape themselves in imported silks and feast on delicacies brought in from overseas, while their less fortunate neighbors were probably wondering if another bowl of millet porridge would appear by magic. This wasn't just a society divided by material possessions. It was also split by power dynamics. The rulers of Great Zimbabwe weren't just figureheads. They were the real deal, wielding influence that stretched far beyond the city walls. And how did they maintain this grip on power? Well, the answer is as old as civilization itself. A little bit of fear and a whole lot of religion. Religion, or at least a belief system, played a crucial role in binding the society together. The rulers, often believed to be divine or semi-divine, were seen as the intermediaries between the people and the spiritual world. This wasn't just a convenient belief for the elite. It was a brilliant PR strategy. If your king is also your spiritual guide, good luck questioning his decisions without risking some serious cosmic repercussions. Great Zimbabwe's political landscape was a chessboard of intrigue, alliances, and betrayals. The rulers weren't just competing with external forces. Internal power struggles were a constant threat. With great power comes great paranoia, and those who sat on the throne had to keep one eye on their rivals and the other on the potential dissent brewing among the masses. It's the kind of political balancing act that would make Machiavelli proud. And let's not gloss over the social stratification. While the elite enjoyed the architectural wonders of stone, the majority lived in more humble dwellings. These mud huts weren't just temporary shelters. They were a reflection of one's place in society. The stone houses were a privilege, a physical manifestation of a family's status and influence. Meanwhile, the rest of the populace was left to dream of stone walls and the luxury they represented. But it wasn't all doom and gloom for the commoners. They were the backbone of the economy. After all, working the land and crafting the goods that fed into the trade network was their labor that ensured the kingdom's prosperity. And while they might not have lived in the lap of luxury, they contributed to the cultural and economic vitality of Great Zimbabwe. It was a society of contrasts, where wealth and poverty, power and subordination coexisted in a delicate dance. Now, let's debunk another myth. It's tempting to romanticize this ancient kingdom as a utopia, a place where everyone knew their role and happiness flowed as freely as the gold. But like any society, Great Zimbabwe had its fair share of challenges. Social mobility was limited, and if you were born into the wrong family, chances are you weren't going to end up in a stone house. The rigid social hierarchy kept the elite in power and the commoners in check, a system that worked until it didn't. Political intrigue was never far from the surface. The rulers had to be shrewd operators, deftly managing alliances and rivalries. They were the puppet masters, pulling the strings in a complex web of power that extended beyond the city walls. And while they might have enjoyed the spoils of trade, they were also acutely aware that their position was never entirely secure. A few missteps, and the precarious balance of power could come crashing down like a poorly built dry stone wall. Religion served as both a unifying force and a tool of control. The belief in a higher power and an ordered universe helped maintain social cohesion, but it also reinforced the status quo. The rulers were seen as the earthly representatives of the gods, a belief that conveniently supported their authority. It was a system that worked, but one that also stifled dissent and discouraged challenges to the established order. Despite the stratification and power struggles, Great Zimbabwe was a thriving civilization, a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. It was a place where culture, commerce, and politics intertwined, creating a rich tapestry that continues to fascinate historians and archaeologists. But as we peel back the layers of this ancient society, we're reminded that the story of Great Zimbabwe is one of both triumph and complexity, a reflection of the very human desire for power, wealth, and stability. So, as we leave the stones of Great Zimbabwe behind, let's carry forward the understanding that history is never black and white. It's a mosaic of stories, each with its own shades of light and dark. And while the ruins may stand silent, the echoes of their past continue to speak volumes about the people who once called this place home. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover in this tale of ancient ambition and intrigue. And now, we dive headfirst into the whirlwind of myths and legends that have wrapped themselves around Great Zimbabwe like an over-enthusiastic boa constrictor. As if the ancient stones weren't mysterious enough, add a dash of historical misunderstanding, a pinch of colonial bias, and you've got a recipe for some seriously outlandish tales. First on our myth-busting hit list, the foreign builders theory. It's like the ancient aliens hypothesis, but, with slightly fewer UFOs. When European explorers first laid eyes on Great Zimbabwe, couldn't fathom that indigenous Africans were the masterminds behind this architectural wonder. Oh no, it had to be the work of the Phoenicians, or maybe the ancient Egyptians, or how about a lost tribe of Israel? It's like a bad episode of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, with extra colonial overtones. The truth, those majestic walls and intricate designs, were the brainchild of the Shona people, who built this monumental city with their own hands, brains, and a healthy dose of local know-how. They didn't need a Phoenician blueprint or an Egyptian tutorial on stone stacking. The archaeological evidence is as clear as the Zimbabwean sky on a good day. Everything, from the dry stone walling techniques to the artifacts found on-site, screams made in Africa. No need for a foreign label. But let's not just point fingers at the 19th century adventurers with their compasses and colonial condescension. These myths were perpetuated because, let's face it, they were a lot more palatable to the colonial mindset. The idea that Africans had their own advanced civilization threw a wrench in the narrative of European superiority. So, instead of rewriting history, they just wrote it wrong. Talk about creative license. The impact of these myths was like a bad hangover. It lingered far too long. Colonial narratives downplayed or outright dismissed the achievements of African societies, casting them as primitive or incapable. This not only tainted historical understanding, but also justified the subjugation and exploitation of African lands and peoples. Because nothing says, let's take over, quite like denying people their own history. Fast forward to today, and the narrative is shifting, albeit slowly. Scholars and historians are working tirelessly to reclaim and celebrate Africa's rich and diverse history. It's like a historical treasure hunt, but instead of gold and jewels, we're digging up truths and long-lost stories. And let's be real, the truth about Great Zimbabwe is far more fascinating than any myth. Consider the economy of Great Zimbabwe. No Phoenician bankrollers here. This was an indigenous trade hub that connected the heart of Africa with the far reaches of the Indian Ocean trade network. Gold and ivory flowed through its markets like water through a sieve, and the Shona people were the ones holding the sieve. Thank you very much. They were savvy traders, skilled artisans, and yes, they built those awe-inspiring stone structures all on their own. But myths have a sticky way of persisting, much like that gum you accidentally step on at the park. Part of the allure is the romanticism. There's a certain charm in imagining lost civilizations and mysterious foreign builders. Who doesn't love a good story of ancient wanderers crafting stone cities in the middle of nowhere? It's the stuff of legend, but it's just that, a legend. Archaeology, however, deals in hard facts, not flights of fancy. The evidence at Great Zimbabwe tells a story of local ingenuity and adaptation. The stone structures were built using granite sourced from nearby hills, shaped with precision, and assembled with a technique that required no mortar, just a keen eye and a steady hand. The fact that these walls have stood for centuries is a testament to their builders' skills, and let's not forget the cultural significance. The soapstone bird carvings found at the site are quintessentially African, representing power, spirit, and identity. They're not just decorative, they're symbolic, woven into the very fabric of the Shona worldview. These artifacts are as African as the baobab tree, rooted deep in the continent's cultural soil. Yet, the myths stubbornly persist in popular imagination, like that catchy song you can't stop humming. It's why the work of historians and archaeologists is so vital. They are like the chorus of fact-checkers in a world of hyperbole. They sift through the evidence, piecing together a narrative that honors the past without the embellishments. The task today is not just about setting the record straight. It's about empowering future generations with a history they can take pride in. Reclaiming Great Zimbabwe's story is part of a broader movement to recognize and celebrate the achievements of African civilizations. It's not just academic, it's personal, political, and cultural. In reclaiming this narrative, we peel back the layers of myth to reveal a story that is both rooted in reality and rich in detail. The Shona people's legacy is one of resilience, creativity, and innovation. It's a story that deserves to be told not just as a footnote in history, but as a central chapter in the human saga. So, as we uncover the truths beneath the myths, let's remember that history is not set in stone, even if the walls of Great Zimbabwe are. It's a living tapestry, woven from countless threads of human experience. And while we may revel in the romance of legends, let's never forget the power and importance of truth. Stay tuned, because there are still mysteries to unravel and stories to tell as we journey deeper into the heart of Great Zimbabwe. As we journey deeper into the heart of Great Zimbabwe, it's time to face the music and tackle the decline of this grand civilization. Spoiler alert, it's a story with more twists than a soap opera finale. So, what brought down this stone-clad titan? Let's dive into the theories, each with its own brand of drama and intrigue. First up, environmental change. Imagine a kingdom so successful it starts to eat itself out of house and home. Overgrazing, deforestation, and soil exhaustion were the ancient equivalents of playing Jenga with your natural resources. Picture this, a landscape overrun with cattle, chomping through the grasslands like a medieval buffet. Not to mention, trees were chopped down faster than you can say timber to fuel fires and build, well, more stuff. The result, a once thriving ecosystem turned into a barren expanse, and no amount of wishful thinking could bring back the fertility. Then there's overpopulation, the age-old issue of too many people, not enough resources. At its peak, Great Zimbabwe housed around 18,000 folks. That's a lot of mouths to feed, and when the grocery list includes everything from millet to imported luxuries, something's gotta give. Imagine cramming all those people into a space like Madison Square Garden and then ask them to live there permanently. Cozy, right? As the population swelled, resources dwindled, and the city's infrastructure started feeling the strain. Of course, wouldn't be a proper historical puzzle without some trade drama. Shifts in trade routes, a staple of economic upheaval, likely played a part in Great Zimbabwe's downfall. When you're the medieval Amazon, any blip in the supply chain spells trouble. As new trade centers emerged, the once bustling market of Great Zimbabwe might have found itself sidelined, like an old blockbuster in the age of streaming. The city's strategic advantage slowly eroded, and with it, the lifeline of commerce that had kept it afloat. Let's not forget internal strife. Power struggles are as old as power itself, and Great Zimbabwe was no stranger to the occasional Game of Thrones-esque showdown. The ruling elite, who once held the reins, might have found themselves embroiled in conflicts that fractured their authority. When leaders squabble, it's the society that pays the price, often with its own stability. Throw in potential rivalries over diminishing resources, and you've got a recipe for political chaos. But enough about the fall, let's pivot to the legacy, because this is where things really get interesting. Today, Great Zimbabwe stands as a symbol of African achievement, a monument to the ingenuity and resilience of its people. Forget the myths of foreign builders. This was a homegrown success story, a testament to the continent's rich history. Those stone walls are more than just rocks. They're a badge of cultural pride, an architectural "I was here," etched into the landscape. In modern Zimbabwe, the ruins have become a rallying point for national identity. The name, Zimbabwe itself, is derived from Dzimba Dza Mabwe, meaning houses of stone in the Shona language. Talk about embracing your roots. The site has been enshrined in everything from the country's flag to its coat of arms, cementing its place in the national psyche. It's a reminder that greatness doesn't need an outside endorsement. It's homegrown, forged from the trials and triumphs of history. But the significance of Great Zimbabwe extends beyond borders. It's a beacon for African heritage, a narrative that challenges the outdated stereotypes of a continent often misunderstood. It's a story of innovation, trade, and cultural exchange, far removed from the simplistic portrayals of dark continent stereotypes. This is Africa's legacy, a testament to the continent's role in the global tapestry of history. As we wrap up this saga, let's reflect on what Great Zimbabwe teaches us about the broader significance of history. It's a lesson in peeling back the layers of myth to uncover the truth beneath. It's about celebrating the achievements of those who came before us and recognizing the complexity of their world. History isn't just a series of dates and events. It's a living dialogue between the past and present. And while it's tempting to get lost in the romance of ancient stones and forgotten kingdoms, the real power lies in understanding their reality. Great Zimbabwe is a reminder that behind every myth is a story worth telling, a reality that's often more compelling than fantasy. It's a call to question the narratives we inherit, to dig deeper and see the world through the eyes of those who lived it. So, as the sun sets on the ruins of Great Zimbabwe, let's take a moment to appreciate the echoes of history that continue to shape our world. These stones may be silent, but their story speaks volumes. They challenge us to look beyond the surface, to seek the truth, and to acknowledge the rich tapestry of human achievement. And who knows, maybe there's a bit of Great Zimbabwe in all of us, a legacy of resilience, a spirit of innovation, and a reminder that history, much like those stone walls, stands the test of time. You might think being a Renaissance painter sounds like a dream, swirling colors, adoring patrons, and maybe a house in Florence to boot. But let's be real. You'd be more likely to find yourself knee-deep in pigment dust, questioning your life choices. Welcome to the 15th century art scene, where the glamour is thin and the reality is, well, let's just say it's a canvas in need of a good cleaning. First off, let's talk cash. You know those vivid blues that make your Instagram sunsets look dull? In the Renaissance, that color came from ultramarine, which was made from grinding lapis lazuli. And this stuff was pricier than a night out in New York City. We're talking about 30 florins per pound. To put that into perspective, that's more than what a skilled laborer earned in a year. Yes, a year. So unless you're rolling in Medici-level ducats, forget about casually popping ultramarine into your palette. And then there's the canvas. Not the kind you grab at your local art supply store for a weekend project. Nope, you'd be working with wooden panels, linen, or even walls themselves. Each came with its own set of complications and costs. Linen had to be treated with rabbit skin glue, a process that was about as fun as it sounds. And wooden panels, they had to be meticulously prepared, or they'd warp faster than a politician's promises. But let's say you managed to scrape together the funds for supplies. You're not exactly free to go all Van Gogh on a piece. Oh no, you'd start as an apprentice, and not the fun kind with a celebrity mentor. Think more along the lines of indentured servitude. You'll be spending your first years mixing paints and cleaning brushes, hoping your master doesn't have a temper as colorful as his palette. Leonardo da Vinci, for instance, spent his early years sweeping floors before he ever got to touch a paintbrush. This apprenticeship isn't just a short stint either. Expect to be stuck in this role for 7 to 10 years. During this time, your social life will be about as lively as a still life painting. The hierarchy in these workshops was rigid. You're at the bottom rung, and moving up requires more than just skill. It demands connections, patience, and a tolerance for back-breaking work. Speaking of labor, let's talk hours. Renaissance artists didn't clock out at 5 p.m. The workday was dictated by daylight, which in good old Italy meant long hours in the summer. You'd be painting until the sun dipped below the horizon. And forget weekends. Those are a modern luxury. Your life revolved around the project, with little room for breaks, unless you count your master's occasional tantrums as entertainment. And social hierarchies. Don't even get me started. You might think today's gig economy is relentless, but the Renaissance art world had its own brutal pecking order. Masters held all the power, and apprentices were expected to follow their lead without question. It's like the worst kind of office politics, only with more paint splatters and far less pay. Sure, the notion of being a celebrated painter sounds romantic, but most artists lived hand-to-mouth. It depended on the whims of patrons, who could drop you faster than a hot potato if a prettier Da Vinci came along. Your survival depended on navigating the complex web of patronage and politics, where a single misstep could cost you everything. So, next time you admire a Renaissance masterpiece, remember the reality behind the beauty. A world of expensive pigments, grueling apprenticeships, and a social structure that makes today's corporate ladders look like hopscotch. It wasn't just art. It was survival, with all the grit and grime that came with it. Welcome to the Renaissance, where your dreams of artistry are just a few florins short of reality. All right, so you've got your ultramarine, you've survived the sweatshop-like conditions of a Renaissance workshop, and you're finally ready to strike out on your own. Congrats. But before you get too excited, we need to talk finances. Your career as a Renaissance artist isn't just about creating jaw-dropping masterpieces. Oh no, it's a high-wire act of economic survival, where the slightest misstep can send you spiraling into poverty faster than you can say Michelangelo. Let's start with commissions, the bread and butter of any aspiring artist. You might imagine these were lavish paydays, the kind that would make Scrooge McDuck dive into his money bin with glee. But the reality, not so much. Payments were often delayed, sometimes by years, and could be laughably low. Imagine spending months on a fresco only to be paid with a bag of grain and a promise of exposure. Sure, exposure might sound nice, but try paying your landlord with it. Take a look at the famed artist Sandro Botticelli. Despite painting iconic works like The Birth of Venus, he often found his pockets emptier than a beggar's cup. In 1481, Botticelli was summoned to Rome to paint frescoes for the Sistine Chapel. Yes, Sistine Chapel. But instead of a king's ransom, he received a modest sum of 200 florins. Not chump change, but considering the project's prestige, It was less big break and more welcome to the grind. Now, if you think you just waltz into the Medici Palace, pitch your latest canvas, and walk away with a sack of gold, think again. Wealthy patrons were the lifeblood of Renaissance artists, but courting them was like navigating a medieval Tinder. Swipe left on the wrong duke, and you're out of luck. These patrons weren't just philanthropists with a penchant for art. They were power players using artists as pawns in a much larger game of influence and prestige. And let's not forget the wild economic swings of the time. The Italian city-states were as politically stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. Florence, Venice, Rome. Each city had its own currency, and inflation was as unpredictable as a Renaissance soap opera. One day your florin could buy you a feast. The next, you're lucky if it gets you a loaf of bread. This economic volatility meant artists had to be part entrepreneur, part hustler, navigating the cutthroat art market with the agility of a modern-day startup founder. Speaking of hustling, let's talk side gigs. Today, we have Uber and Etsy, but back then, artists supplemented their income with jobs that would make your modern side hustle look like a cakewalk. Need a crucifix restored? You're on it. How about designing a carnival float? Sign you up. Artists couldn't afford to be picky. They took whatever work came their way, from banner painting to goldsmithing. Leonardo da Vinci, the quintessential Renaissance man, was not just a painter, but an inventor, architect, and even a military engineer. Talk about a diversified portfolio. Of course, the darkly comedic part of all this is that despite these hardships, the myth of the starving artist somehow became a badge of honor. The idea that suffering is integral to the creative process was as popular back then as it is today. But trust me, there was nothing romantic about living hand-to-mouth, constantly worrying whether your next meal would come from a patron's whim or a stroke of luck. Yet, amidst all this financial chaos, there was a certain allure to being a Renaissance artist. The opportunity to leave a lasting legacy, to see your work admired by generations, was a powerful motivator. And while the odds were stacked against you, those rare moments of success, when a patron truly appreciated your work and paid handsomely for it, were as satisfying as finally getting a viral hit in today's content-driven world. So next time you gaze at a Renaissance masterpiece and get swept away by its beauty, remember the grit and grind behind the glamour. The artist didn't just paint with colors. They painted with their very survival, each brushstroke a testament to their hustle in a world that was as unforgiving as it was vibrant. And while your dreams of being a Renaissance painter might now seem a few florins short of reality, the stories of those who braved the financial roller coaster remind us of the timeless dance between art and commerce, a dance we still waltz to today. Now, as you stand there marveling at the dreamy notion of being a Renaissance artist, let's pivot to the treacherous tightrope walk between power, religion, and art. Imagine this. You're not just a painter. You're a political pawn on a board where popes and princes are the grandmasters. Your canvas is a battlefield where every brushstroke could either elevate you to dizzying heights of fame or send you plunging into the abyss of obscurity. Let's start with the patrons, those illustrious figures who could make or break your career. The Medici family in Florence, for example, were the Renaissance version of a billionaire tech mogul. They weren't just buying art for the love of aesthetics. They were investing in power and influence. Artists were expected to glorify their patrons, immortalizing them in grand portraits or allegorical scenes that screamed, "Look how important I am." Fail to capture their likeness in just the right light, and you could find yourself out of favor faster than you can say, Michelangelo. But it wasn't just about capturing a flattering image. Oh no, the stakes were much higher. Your artwork was a political statement, a visual propaganda tool. It wasn't enough to simply paint a pretty picture. You were expected to convey the patron's wealth, religious devotion, and political clout. A slip of the brush, or a poorly chosen symbol, could be interpreted as a slight, perhaps even treasonous. Just ask Sandro Botticelli, who found himself in hot water when his work fell out of favor during the rise of the fervent preacher Savonarola. His once celebrated paintings were suddenly seen as decadent and sinful, and the artist who had once rubbed shoulders with the Medici found himself on the outs. Speaking of religious fervor, let's talk about the church's role in all this. The Catholic Church was the ultimate tastemaker of the period. It was as if they had the Renaissance equivalent of a tick-tock algorithm, deciding what was in vogue and what was blasphemous. The Sistine Chapel, adorned by the likes of Michelangelo, wasn't just a place of worship. It was a visual manifesto of papal authority. The popes wielded their influence like a maestro conducting an orchestra, dictating themes and subjects that aligned with their spiritual and political agendas. Michelangelo himself had a famously contentious relationship with Pope Julius Roman II, who commissioned him to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling. The Pope was known for his fiery temper and relentless demands. Imagine a project manager from hell. Michelangelo wasn't just painting. He was navigating the whims of a pope who would change his mind on a dime. Julius Roman II was a man of contradictions, both a patron of the arts and a warmonger, and his directives could shift with the political winds. Yet the ceiling remains a masterpiece, a testament to Michelangelo's ability to paint both beauty and power under immense pressure. Now, let's not forget the constant threat of stepping on the wrong political toes. Renaissance Italy was a patchwork of city-states, each with its own rulers, alliances, and vendettas. Florence, Venice, Rome, these weren't just cities, they were political tinderboxes. An artist had to be a diplomat, carefully balancing allegiances. Get it wrong, and you could find yourself banished or worse. Take Pietro Perugino, who found himself in hot water because of his associations during the turbulent political shifts in Florence. One day you're in the Medici's good graces, the next you're persona non grata. But amidst the chaos, there was a strange allure. The opportunity to work on grand projects that would be admired for centuries, to be a part of the cultural fabric of the time, was an intoxicating prospect. Artists weren't just creating, they were shaping history, one brushstroke at a time. And for those who could navigate the treacherous waters of politics and religion, the rewards could be immense. Yet, the romance of the era, the beauty of the art, often obscures the perilous path artists walked. Behind the gilded frames and frescoed ceilings lay a world of power plays and precarious alliances. The Renaissance was as much about survival as it was about creation, a world where the line between triumph and tragedy was as thin as a single brushstroke. As we dive deeper into this intricate dance of art and politics, remember that each masterpiece tells a story far richer than the paint on its surface. It's a story of ambition, danger, and the indomitable human spirit, forever etched into the annals of history. Stay tuned, because the Renaissance has many more secrets to reveal, and we're just getting started on this colorful journey through time. As we peel back the layers of Renaissance mythology, the solo genius myth is one of those enduring tales that needs a good dose of reality. Sure, the image of an artist alone in a candlelit studio, wrestling with his muse, has a certain romantic allure. But in truth, the Renaissance art scene was more about team spirit than solitary genius. Think less tortured artist and more startup company with an assembly line of creativity. Let's dive into the hive of activity that was the Renaissance workshop. These places were bustling with apprentices, journeymen and masters, all working together like a well-oiled machine, or at least trying to. Picture Leonardo da Vinci, not as the lone wolf genius, but more as the Steve Jobs of his day, orchestrating a symphony of talent to bring his visions to life. Yes, he had the big ideas, but without the hands and skills of his workshop team, many of those ideas would have stayed just that, ideas. Take the famous The Last Supper. While Da Vinci gets all the glory, this masterpiece was a group effort. Apprentice hands mixed the paints, prepared the wall, and even filled in some of the less focal details. Da Vinci, with his notoriously short attention span, was known for leaving projects half-finished or jumping to the next big thing. It was the apprentices who kept the wheels turning, ensuring the fresco didn't crumble into obscurity before it was even completed. And speaking of teamwork, let's not forget about the Verrocchio workshop, where the young Da Vinci cut his teeth. Andrea del Verrocchio was one of the most influential workshop masters of the time, training a generation of artists who would go on to become legends in their own rights. His shop was a melting pot of talent, where artists collaborated on commissions, each contributing their strengths. This was not a place for egos. It was a crucible of creativity, where the sum was definitely greater than its parts. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like a Renaissance version of an art collective, you'd be spot on. Collaboration wasn't just a method, it was a necessity. Many of those grand altarpieces and frescoes were simply too massive for one person to handle alone. They required the skills of many, each with a specific role, much like the credits rolling at the end of a movie. One artist might specialize in anatomy, another in landscapes, and yet another in gilding, all contributing to the final masterpiece. But let's not sugarcoat it. These workshops could be cutthroat. Competition was fierce, and masters were always on the lookout for the next big thing or the next big talent to steal. Apprentices were often poached from rival workshops, and the pressure to produce was relentless. It was like a Renaissance version of a reality TV show, minus the cameras, but with plenty of drama. The stakes were high, with reputations and livelihoods on the line. And speaking of drama, let's get back to those mythologized figures like Leonardo da Vinci. While da Vinci is often painted as the epitome of the lonely genius, the truth is far more complex. Yes, he was a visionary, but he was also a networker, a hustler, and a collaborator who knew the value of a strong team. His notebooks, filled with sketches and musings, are a testament to his boundless curiosity and intellect, but they also reveal a man deeply entrenched in the collaborative spirit of his time. Da Vinci wasn't just about painting. He was a polymath, dabbling in anatomy, engineering, and even military design. And for all these pursuits, he relied on a network of collaborators, experts, and craftsmen. It wasn't just about being a jack of all trades. It was about leveraging the expertise of others to turn his visions into reality. His famed Vitruvian Man is as much a product of his own genius as it is of the collective knowledge of his peers. But let's not forget the economic side of things. Running a workshop was akin to running a business, and like any business, it required savvy management. Costs had to be controlled, commissions secured, and deadlines met. This was no place for the faint-hearted or the disorganized. Masters who couldn't manage their workshops effectively found themselves out of work and out of pocket faster than you can say patronage. In this light, the Renaissance workshop was a microcosm of the broader economic and social currents of the time. It mirrored the guild system, which regulated trades and ensured quality. Artists were not just creators. They were members of a professional class, subject to the same rules and restrictions as any other trade. This was art as a commercial enterprise, where creativity met commerce in a delicate dance of supply and demand. As we unravel the myth of the solitary genius, it's clear that the Renaissance was a team sport. Behind every great master was a cadre of talented individuals, each playing their part in the grand tapestry of creativity. So next time you gaze at a Renaissance masterpiece, remember that it's not just a testament to individual genius, but to the power of collaboration. And while the romantic image of the lone artist toiling in isolation persists, the reality is far more vibrant and complex. It's a story of collaboration, competition, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. In the Renaissance, art was not just a solitary endeavor. It was a collective triumph, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of the human spirit. As we continue our journey through this fascinating period, keep in mind that the Renaissance wasn't just about the art. It was about the artists and the communities that shaped them. Stay tuned, because the story of the Renaissance has many more brushstrokes to reveal. As we continue our journey through this fascinating period, keep in mind that the Renaissance wasn't just about the art. It was about the artists and the communities that shaped them. And yet, despite all the backstage drama and economic gymnastics, the Renaissance still captivates us. It's a bit like that classic rock band that, despite the endless lineup changes and questionable financial decisions, still fills stadiums. But why do we remain so enamored with this era? Let's not kid ourselves. The Renaissance was no walk in the park. It was more like running a marathon while juggling flaming torches. Yet here we are, centuries later, still swooning over it. Maybe it's because the Renaissance brought art to the people, literally, by painting it on public walls and church ceilings. It was Instagram before Instagram, with a touch of divine inspiration. Each fresco was a snapshot of the human condition, capturing both the divine and the everyday in a way that still resonates with us. Take the Sistine Chapel ceiling, painted by Michelangelo between 1508 and 1512. It's a monumental work that required not just artistic genius, but also the physical stamina of a cross-fit champion. Forget the romantic image of Michelangelo lying on his back. He was standing, craning his neck, and contorting his body to reach every corner of that celestial canvas. Despite its challenges, or maybe because of them. The Sistine Chapel remains a testament to human ambition and creativity. The Renaissance's legacy is also a reflection of its ability to combine the sacred with the secular. Artists were no longer confined to religious themes. They explored humanism, science, and even humor. Yes, humor. Just look at the cheeky grins and mischievous eyes in some of the period's portraits. These paintings reveal not just the sitter's status, but also a glimpse into their personality, warts and all. And let's not overlook the technological advancements that came out of this era. The development of linear perspective, pioneered by Brunelleschi and Alberti, gave paintings a three-dimensional depth that was revolutionary. This was the Renaissance's version of HD, transforming flat surfaces into realistic spaces that drew viewers into the scene. Suddenly, art wasn't just something you looked at, it was something you were part of. But here's the kicker. Despite all the grinding, thankless work, and the precarious balance between poverty and prosperity, the myth of the Renaissance artist as a lone, suffering genius persists. Why? Perhaps it's the allure of the tortured soul creating beauty out of chaos. Or maybe it's because we all secretly believe that great art requires great suffering. This romantic notion, while completely detached from the gritty reality of workshop life, adds an irresistible layer of drama to the narrative. Yet, the Renaissance also laid the groundwork for the modern concept of the artist as an individual. Before this period, artists were often seen as mere craftsmen. But by the time the Renaissance rolled around, figures like Michelangelo and Da Vinci had become celebrities in their own right. They were the rock stars of their day, complete with scandalous reputations and the kind of fame that made their contemporaries both admire and envy them. This newfound status didn't just elevate the artists, it elevated the art itself. Works from this period aren't just admired for their beauty, they are revered as cultural milestones. The legacy of the Renaissance is a tapestry of innovation, ambition, and human expression. It's a reminder that art, at its core, is about connecting with others across time and space. In the end, the Renaissance leaves us with a paradox, an era of profound beauty built on the backs of grinding labor and social maneuvering. Yet, it's this very contradiction that makes it so fascinating. We admire the art, but often forget the sweat and toil behind it. It's a reminder that behind every masterpiece is a story of human resilience and creativity, a testament to the power of art to transcend its origins and speak to something greater. So, the next time you stand in front of a Renaissance masterpiece, take a moment to consider the artist's journey. Appreciate the skill, yes, but also the struggle. Remember that each brushstroke is a fingerprint from the past, a connection to the human spirit that continues to inspire us. The Renaissance may have been a gritty business, but its legacy is nothing short of miraculous. It's a lesson that beauty often comes from the most unexpected places, and that art, like life, is a rich tapestry woven from triumph and tribulation. And there you have it, the Renaissance in all its vibrant, chaotic glory. A time of brilliant art and brutal realities, where the line between legend and life was blurred by the strokes of a brush. It's a period that continues to captivate us, reminding us that true artistry is as much about the journey as it is about the destination. So here's to the Renaissance artists, the unsung heroes of history, who painted not just with colors, but with their very souls. If you ever found yourself in medieval Europe with the sudden urge to build a castle, you'd better have the equivalent of a king's ransom in your pocket and a knack for playing real-life Tetris. These stone behemoths weren't just about looking like a fairy tale fortress. They were the medieval equivalent of a Swiss army knife, part home, part military base, and part power statement. And let's be honest, who doesn't love a good moat? Take the quintessential castle design. For instance, while the modern homeowner might fret over open-concept living, medieval lords were more concerned with optimal arrow-slit placement. These narrow openings might look like a contractor's mistake, but they were perfect for launching arrows at any unwanted visitors. And talk about walls. Those bad boys could be up to 15 feet thick. Imagine trying to hang a picture on that. But castles weren't just about keeping the bad guys out. They were bustling micro-cities, where daily life hummed along with the rhythm of medieval necessities and peculiarities. You had your great hall, the medieval version of a fancy living room where meals were served, and knights swapped tales of derring-do, probably over a goblet or two of something potent. Food was a communal affair, with everyone from the lord to the lowliest servant sharing the same table. A feast could easily involve several courses, and considering the absence of refrigeration, let's just say it was a good idea to develop a strong stomach. Now, let's talk about the most underappreciated part of castle life, toilets, or, as they quaintly called them, garderobes. These were basically medieval porta-potties built into the walls, with waste conveniently dropped into the moat or a cesspit. It's a wonder they didn't have scented tours back then. And while we might chuckle at the idea of a stone throne, garderobes were considered a luxury. Some castles boasted dozens of these, which would make them the medieval equivalent of a mansion with 10 bathrooms. Beyond the logistics, castles were also economic powerhouses. Forget the stock market. Economics here was all about agriculture and land. The surrounding countryside, controlled by the lord of the castle, provided food, resources, and labor. The lord was essentially the CEO of a vast estate, managing everything from crop rotation to tax collection. Speaking of taxes, peasants paid theirs in goods or services, not coins. So, if you were having a rough year, no worries. Just send a few chickens to the castle, and you were golden. Politically, these fortresses were nerve centers of power. The lord of the castle wielded both military and judicial authority over the surrounding lands. In turbulent times, the castle was a refuge, a courtroom, and the local version of a Pentagon briefing room. Decisions made within its walls could ripple out to shape the fates of entire regions. And of course, no discussion of castles would be complete without a nod to the romanticized vision of chivalrous knights and damsels in distress. The reality was often less poetic. Knights were more likely to be found bickering over land rights or engaging in the medieval equivalent of a turf war than rescuing damsels. Yet, this romantic notion persists, fueled by centuries of storytelling that conveniently gloss over the smell of unwashed bodies after a month in armor. So, next time you see a picturesque castle on a hill, remember it wasn't all banquets and jousting tournaments. It was a mashup of medieval practicality and necessity, designed to be as intimidating as it was functional. From the stone walls to the strategic garderobes, every detail had a purpose that spoke volumes about the world of its time, a world that was as gritty and complex as the stones of the castles themselves. So, before you start dreaming of lords basking in luxury atop their castle walls, let's get real about the man with the title, the medieval lord himself. Picture a guy who allegedly had it all, except maybe a toothbrush. The medieval lord was less about lounging in opulence and more about juggling responsibilities like a medieval Cirque du Soleil performer. You see, running a castle was like managing a small nation. He was the head honcho, the top dog, the CEO with a sword, but with far more chores than glory. First, let's debunk the myth of the indolent lord draped in silks, eating grapes while jesters frolicked around. Reality check. The lord's day was filled with administrative headaches that would make an IRS agent wince. He was responsible for everything from justice to defense, agriculture to hospitality. And if you think hosting a holiday dinner is stressful, try hosting a feast where the guest list includes everyone from knights to local peasants. The lord had to ensure everyone was fed, entertained, and impressed, because in the medieval popularity contest, reputation was everything. If a lord wasn't well regarded, he could kiss his alliances and security goodbye. Now, let's talk money, or the medieval lack thereof. Managing a castle was like running a high-maintenance estate on a shoestring budget. The castle itself was a financial black hole with constant repairs, upgrades, and defense needs. Forget about central heating or double glazing. Keeping the place warm and secure required resources that would make modern homeowners shiver. A castle wasn't just a home. It was a fortress, an office, and a community hub all rolled into one. The economic weight was enormous. Maintaining the garrison, paying servants, and funding occasional wars didn't come cheap. A lord often found himself juggling resources creatively. Think of it as medieval budgeting gymnastics. Speaking of economics, the lord's wealth was intimately tied to the land. His income depended on the productivity of the surrounding villages and fields, which were worked by peasants who paid rent in goods or labor. It was a symbiotic relationship. Peasants provided the manpower, while the lord offered protection and governance. And yet, despite this seemingly harmonious setup, the system was fraught with tension. Poor harvests, plagues, or bad weather could throw a wrench into the works, leading to shortfalls that would make a modern stock market crash look like a hiccup. And let's not forget the Lord's role as a host. Medieval feasting wasn't just about stuffing your face. It was a strategic display of wealth and power. Hosting grand banquets was essential for reaffirming alliances and showcasing the Lord's generosity and status. These events were the social media of the time. Every dish and detail was a statement, but it was an expensive habit. A single feast could consume the equivalent of a year's income, especially if exotic spices or imported wines were on the menu. The pressure to maintain appearances was real, and one misstep could lead to whispers and gossip that spread faster than a medieval cough in a crowded tavern. But the Lord wasn't alone in his endeavors. His household was a complex web of roles and responsibilities, from the steward who managed day-to-day operations to the chamberlain who oversaw finances. The Lord's wife, often a lady of strategic marital alliances, played a crucial role too. She was the glue that held the domestic sphere together, managing servants and ensuring that hospitality standards didn't slip. It was a partnership of necessity, with each member of the household contributing to the smooth running of the estate. The Lord also had to be a military leader, ready to defend his lands at a moment's notice. This wasn't just about leading troops into battle. It involved training, strategy, and logistics. Keeping a small army ready required funds and resources. Armor, weapons, and provisions didn't materialize out of thin air. And when the trumpets of war sounded, the Lord's ability to rally his forces and allies could make or break his fortunes. In a world where borders were constantly shifting and allegiances were as fickle as medieval weather, the Lord's military prowess was a prized asset. And let's not romanticize the knightly orders that swore fealty to the Lord. While the tales of chivalric knights paint a picture of noble warriors, the reality was often more pragmatic. Knights were essentially the Lord's private army, but loyalty came at a price. They expected land, titles, and rewards for their service, and managing these expectations was another item on the Lord's never-ending to-do list. Balancing the interests of knights, peasants, and neighboring lords required diplomatic finesse that would put modern politicians to shame. In the grand scheme, being a lord was a balancing act between maintaining power and managing resources. It was a life of constant negotiation, where the stakes were high and the margins for error slim. So next time you envision a medieval lord living a life of ease, remember the reality was far more complex and fraught with challenges. Beneath the veneer of opulence lay a world of responsibility, where every decision had ripple effects across the estate. The Lord's life was a testament to the intricate social and economic tapestry of medieval society, a world where power dynamics, resource management, and social standing were inextricably linked. And while the myth may endure, the reality was as gritty and grounded as the very stones of the castles they called home. Now, shifting the spotlight from the lords who were essentially juggling medieval power and resource management like a circus act, let's meet the ladies of the castle. Forget the image of a damsel in distress pining away in a tower. These women were more like the unsung CEOs of medieval domestic and diplomatic life. They might not have been wielding swords, but they were certainly wielding influence. Take the lady of the castle, for example. Her role was as multifaceted as a medieval tapestry. She had to manage the household like a pro, ensuring that everything ran smoothly from the wine cellar to the wool stores. And we're not talking about a couple of rooms here. A sizable castle could have upwards of 50-150 rooms, each with its own set of quirks and demands. The lady oversaw a small army of servants, cooks, cleaners, and even the odd jester, keeping them in line with the skill of a seasoned HR manager. But her duties didn't stop with household management. Oh no, she was also a key player in the realms of diplomacy and politics. Marriages at the time were less about love and more about strategic alliances. If medieval Europe had a Tinder, it would be a scroll filled with family crests instead of selfies. These marriages were the original power couple moves, designed to consolidate land, wealth, and influence. The lady of the castle often found herself at the negotiating table, brokering these alliances, and sometimes even managing estates in her husband's absence, a role that could include defending the castle if the lord was off on a crusade or political mission. And let's not ignore the martial aspect of their lives. While they might not have been strapping on armor, ladies were often trained in the basics of defense. Think of them as having a medieval black belt in castle security. When the men were away, the lady was responsible for the estate's defense, organizing the guards, and ensuring the castle was prepared for any siege tactics, which were as common as medieval plagues. Jeanne de Clisson, the Lioness of Brittany, took this to a whole new level. After her husband was executed by the French king, she turned pirate, capturing ships to avenge his death. Talk about a career pivot. On the chivalry front, the reality was often a far cry from the romantic tales of knights risking life and limb for a lady's favor. The concept of courtly love was a literary invention, more about poetic expression than actual practice. Chaucer's The Knight's Tale might have you believe knights were the epitome of noble devotion, but the truth was usually more transactional. Knights were more concerned with land and titles than love letters. A knight's loyalty was often pledged with a handshake and a land grant, rather than any grand romantic gesture. Yet, the myth of chivalrous knights and swooning maidens has endured, fueled by minstrels and riders who knew a good story when they saw one. In reality, a lady's influence often came down to her ability to navigate the social and political landscape as deftly as any knight wielded a sword. She was expected to be as skilled in diplomacy as in embroidery, and her success was measured in the alliances she formed and the stability she ensured for her family and estate. Economically speaking, the lady's role was critical. She oversaw the production of goods that kept the castle self-sufficient: wool, linen, and dairy products, to name a few. The economic backbone of many a medieval estate was the lady's domain, ensuring a steady flow of resources and income. And while the lord might be out leading troops or negotiating with neighboring lords, it was often the lady who kept the economic wheels turning. So, while the romanticized image of the medieval lady might persist, the truth was that these women were powerhouses in their own right. They wielded influence in ways that were often subtle, but no less significant than the more overt displays of power seen in the battlefield or court. Theirs was a world of strategy, management, and diplomacy, where every decision could alter the fortunes of their family and estate. They were the linchpins of the medieval social order, balancing tradition with the often harsh realities of their time. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, the ladies of the castle were not just figures of beauty or passive participants in their own stories. They were active agents, shaping the course of history through their roles in household management, diplomacy, and sometimes even warfare. So next time you envision a lady of the castle, forget the tower-bound damsel and picture instead a woman of strategy, influence, and power, navigating the complexities of her world with all the skill and grace of a true medieval maestro. While the lords and ladies of the castle were busy maneuvering through the medieval maze of power and politics, there was another, less glamorous reality humming just below the surface. Enter the servants, the unsung heroes of the castle's ecosystem, the true multitaskers of the medieval world. These individuals were the gears and cogs that kept the castle's grand machinery running smoothly, even if their hard work too often went unnoticed by the noble occupants. First up, let's talk about the cooks. Forget the romanticized vision of banquet halls overflowing with food, like a medieval all-you-can-eat buffet. Behind every feast was a kitchen crew working harder than a modern-day restaurant on a Friday night. The head cook, sometimes known as the master cook, was essentially the Gordon Ramsay of the medieval kitchen, minus the reality TV camera crew. This culinary maestro had to orchestrate meals for hundreds of people, sourcing ingredients that were as unpredictable as medieval weather. With no refrigeration, preserving food was an art form, relying on salting, smoking, and pickling to keep things edible. And when it came to spices, forget your spice rack at home. Pepper, saffron, and cinnamon were the medieval equivalent of gold dust, imported from faraway lands and stored more securely than the crown jewels. But the kitchen wasn't just about feeding the lords and ladies. It was a hotbed, literally, of activity, where junior cooks, scullions, and spit boys worked tirelessly. The latter were often young boys tasked with turning the spit to roast meats, a job as tedious as it was crucial. Imagine a medieval rotisserie that needed constant human attention. The whole operation was a well-oiled machine, and any hiccup could mean disaster, not to mention a few choice words from the master cook. Then you had the butlers and stewards, not merely there to pour the wine and fluff the cushions. These were the right-hand men of the household, managing everything from the wine cellar to the pantry supplies. The steward, or seneschal, was the logistical brains behind the operation, ensuring that everything ran like clockwork. He was the precursor to the modern-day CFO, keeping tabs on the estate's resources and making sure the books balanced, even when the Lord wanted to host another extravagant feast. Speaking of feasts, let's tackle the myth of endless merrymaking. Sure, the idea of a never-ending party sounds appealing, but the reality was more akin to a high-stakes performance. Feasts were social and political events, a chance for the Lord to show off his wealth and curry favor with guests. But for the servants, it was a logistical nightmare. Setting up the great hall, serving multiple courses, and then cleaning up afterward was no small feat. Imagine hosting a dinner party for 200 of your closest frenemies every week, and all this under the watchful eyes of the guests, ready to whisper about any mishap faster than you could say spilled wine. The jester, another romanticized figure, deserves a mention too. While we might picture them as clownish entertainers, jesters were often sharp-witted satirists who walked a fine line. They had the unique freedom to poke fun at the lords and ladies, a medieval form of social commentary that could entertain and enlighten if delivered with enough finesse. But don't be fooled. Their role was precarious. One misstep or ill-timed joke could mean a swift fall from grace, or worse, the medieval equivalent of being cancelled. And let's not forget the foot soldiers of castle life, the labourers, maids, and stable hands. These folks toiled away at the grunt work that kept the castle functioning. From mucking out the stables to maintaining the gardens, their days were long and physically demanding. They were the backbone of the castle economy, working from sunrise to sunset, often for little more than room and board. And while the allure of castle life might have drawn them in, the reality was often far less glamorous, with strict hierarchies and rigid roles. Now, you might ask, what did all this service get you? Well, besides a bed in the drafty servant quarters, the main reward was stability, a rare commodity in a world where life could be as unpredictable as a medieval tournament. For many, it was a chance to escape the hardships of rural peasant life, offering a modicum of security in the shadow of stone walls. In terms of hierarchy, the servant class was as complex as the nobility they served. There were clear distinctions between the roles, and upward mobility was about as likely as a serf being knighted. The social ladder was steep and slippery, but for those who could navigate it, there were opportunities to rise, often through loyalty, skill, or a well-placed marriage. The economic underpinning of this system was fascinating. Servants were typically paid in kind, food, shelter, and sometimes a small stipend. The lord's ability to provide these was directly tied to the estate's productivity, making the entire system a delicate balance of supply and demand. In times of prosperity, life might be bearable, even comfortable. But in lean years, when crops failed or plagues struck, the whole castle ecosystem felt the strain. So next time you picture a medieval castle, don't just envision the lords and ladies in their finery. Remember the army of servants who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, their lives woven into the very fabric of the castle's existence. They were the ones who made the feasts happen, who kept the fires burning, and who ensured that the castle remained a symbol of power and prestige. Their stories may not be as well documented or as glamorous, but they are just as integral to understanding the true nature of medieval life. So, as we continue our journey through the winding corridors of history, let us not forget the invaluable contributions of those who toiled in the shadows, the true unsung heroes of the medieval world. As we bid a fond, perhaps slightly relieved farewell to the unsung heroes of the castle, the cooks, the jesters, the spit-turning boys, it's time to confront the elephant in the great hall. Why did these grand fortresses of stone and status eventually fall out of favor? Spoiler alert, castles didn't just vanish because someone invented central heating. No, the decline of castles as both fortresses and homes was a much more explosive affair, literally and figuratively. Enter the cannon, the game-changer of medieval warfare. By the 15th century, this newfangled technology was blowing holes in castle walls faster than you could say reinforced masonry. The classic stone fortress, once the medieval equivalent of a high-security vault, suddenly had all the protective power of a papier-mâché piñata. Cannons didn't just change the rules, they flipped the entire board over. A castle's thick walls, previously impervious to the battering ram, were no match for these iron behemoths. as the cannonballs flew. The age of the castle, as an indomitable stronghold, crumbled like so much overbaked bread. But it wasn't just military might that spelled doom for the castle. The political landscape was shifting, too. The rise of centralized nation-states meant that power was being consolidated in the hands of a few, rather than being spread across the patchwork quilt of feudal lords. Monarchs, eager to assert their dominance, preferred palaces to castles. I live in a drafty fortress when you could have Versailles, with its endless halls and questionable plumbing. Economically, maintaining a castle was akin to trying to keep a classic car running on a student budget. The cost of repairs alone was enough to make a lord's wallet weep, and while a good moat might deter the Ard peasant rebellion, it did nothing against the relentless tide of financial reality. As trade and commerce boomed, the importance of land-based power waned, and with it, the necessity for these stone giants. Yet the allure of the castle didn't vanish with its practical utility. Far from it. In the romantic imagination, castles took on a life of their own. They became the backdrop of fairy tales and legends, places where magic and mystery were as thick as the fog rolling over the battlements. Who doesn't picture a castle when they think of Cinderella, even though her story is about as historically accurate as a Hollywood biopic? And speaking of Hollywood, let's not forget the cultural juggernaut that is Game of Thrones. While the series may have taken some creative liberties, dragons, anyone, it tapped into our enduring fascination with castles as symbols of power, intrigue, and drama. From the monstrous walls of Winterfell to the impassable heights of the Eyrie, these fictional fortresses reignited our love affair with the medieval, even if they did stretch the architectural feasibility of a 1,000-foot wall. But let's circle back to reality for a moment. The truth is, while castles may no longer serve as military fortresses or administrative hubs, they've left an indelible mark on the landscape and our cultural psyche. Many have become tourist attractions, drawing millions each year eager to walk the halls once trod by knights and kings. Others have been lovingly restored, transformed into luxury hotels or private residences. Imagine Airbnb a room in a 12th century tower. Talk about a unique selling point. Yet, despite their current roles as charming relics or tourist traps, castles are a testament to a world that was as brutal as it was beautiful. They remind us of a time when power was held as much by stone as by steel, when the line between survival and splendor was as thin as the drawbridge over a moat. They are the ghostly echoes of a feudal system that, with all its faults, laid the foundation for much of modern society. So, as we close this chapter on medieval castles, let's do so with a nod to their dual nature. They were places of refuge and oppression, centers of power, and scenes of unspeakable violence. They housed both the opulent banquets of the lords and the quiet toil of the servants. Every stone tells a story. Every arrow slit a reminder of a world where life was as unpredictable as the next siege. The myths endure because, at their heart, they capture something timeless. Our fascination with power, our yearning for romance, and our endless curiosity about the past. Castles may no longer dominate the physical landscape as they once did, but they continue to loom large in our imaginations, casting long shadows over the stories we tell and the dreams we dare to dream. So next time you pass by a crumbling tower or watch a knight in shining armor on screen, remember the real history lurking beneath the legend. It's a tale as old as time and just as compelling. You've just stepped into the Roman Senate, a den of sharp minds and sharper daggers, where the toga is your armor, and each meeting is a battle of wits and wills. Congratulations, you're now a player in one of history's most infamous political arenas. Forget about the serene marble columns and noble speeches. This is more like Senate Survivor, Rome edition, where alliances shift faster than the Tiber's current, and the stakes are as high as the Seven Hills. Welcome to the Cursus Honorum, the career ladder every Roman senator dreams of scaling. It's not just a path, it's a gladiatorial arena of ambition, where each rung requires both cunning and a fair bit of coin. We're talking about a sequence of public offices that starts with the quaestorship, and if Fortuna smiles upon you, ends with the consulship. Quaestors take care of the money, or at least try to keep track of Rome's notoriously slippery finances. Then you've got the aediles, those poor souls tasked with maintaining the city's infrastructure and organizing the games, making them the party planners of the ancient world. Next up are the praetors, judges in the grand courtroom drama of Rome, before you finally hit the jackpot with the consulship, the pinnacle of Roman political power, shared by two men each year to keep egos in check, sort of. Climbing this ladder isn't just about ambition, it's about survival. Being a senator in Rome is like walking through a minefield while juggling flaming torches. You need allies, and lots of them. Those toga-clad figures around you. Each one is a potential ally or adversary, maybe even both. The Senate fluctuated between 300 and 600 members, depending on the political climate, and every single one has an agenda. The key is to make sure yours aligns with enough others to keep you afloat and your head firmly on your shoulders. Speaking of togas, let's talk about your new wardrobe. This isn't your average bed sheet. A good toga could set you back quite a few sestertii, and it's your first signal to the world that you're a player in this high-stakes game. These garments were the Roman equivalent of a sharp business suit, or maybe more like a custom-tailored piece from Gucci. A toga praetexta, with its distinctive purple border, marks you out as a man of rank and means. But beware, this isn't just fashion for fashion's sake. It's a political statement. In Rome, appearances are everything, and your toga tells the world exactly where you stand, politically, socially, and financially. Now, let's debunk a myth or two about this esteemed body of statesmen. While Hollywood might paint them as a group of noble, elderly philosophers debating the fate of the empire, the reality was a lot messier and a lot more Machiavellian. The Senate was more akin to a Roman version of House of Cards than a quiet council of wise elders. Senators were often in their 30s and 40s, not the white-haired sages of Hollywood lore, and they were as likely to be found plotting with, or against, each other as they were debating policy. Take, for instance, the famous, or infamous, Gaius Julius Caesar. Before he was the Caesar, he was a young senator climbing the Cursus Honorum, navigating through the treacherous waters of Roman politics with a mix of charm, ruthlessness, and a knack for spectacle that would make any modern-day influencer envious. He was known for his debts, which were as legendary as his military campaigns. But those debts were investments in his political career. Lavish games, public feasts, and gifts to the right people could buy you the kind of loyalty money can't usually buy. It's a lesson in political economics that will be right at home in any modern campaign strategy session. The Senate meetings themselves were less about orderly debate and more about heated arguments punctuated by shouts, jeers, and occasionally physical altercations. Think of it as a cross between a vigorous debate club and a wrestling ring, with the added bonus of political careers hanging in the balance. Decisions were made not just by eloquence, but by the loudest voices and the most persuasive or coercive of arguments. And then there's the patron-client system, the social glue that held this chaotic mess together. As a senator, you are both a patron and a client. Your power depends on the number of clients you have, people who owe you favors or support in exchange for your protection and influence. It's a bit like collecting followers, but these followers can sway votes and win you elections. Clients could range from fellow senators to freed slaves, and managing these relationships was as crucial as any speech delivered on the Senate floor. So here you are, a senator in the cutthroat world of Roman politics, where the toga is your battle gear. Alliances are as fragile as the Republic itself, and each meeting could be your last. But don't worry too much. Just keep your friends close, your enemies closer, and your toga impeccably draped. Welcome to the game. Let's see if you can survive it. Here you are then, smack dab in the middle of Rome's political arena, where keeping your seat is less about comfort and more about clinging to power like a gladiator on a wild bull. The Senate wasn't just a job, it was a lifestyle, and maintaining your position required a mix of strategic alliances, financial wizardry, and the kind of social skills that would make a modern PR guru weep with envy. First up, let's dive into the art of political alliances. Imagine social networking, but with a touch more betrayal. Forget LinkedIn. This is where your toga-clad pals either have your back or are sticking a stylus in it. In Rome, being a senator was as much about who you knew as what you knew. This meant forging alliances faster than you could say, "Et tu, brute." Take the example of Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, better known as Pompey the Great. Now, Pompey didn't just wake up one day and decide to be a key player in Roman politics. No, he carefully crafted his alliances, marrying into influential families to solidify his power. His marriage to Caesar's daughter, Julia, was less about romance and more about political strategy. Talk about mixing business with pleasure, right? The backbone of these alliances was the patron-client system, Rome's answer to the who-you-know conundrum. Picture this. You're a senator, and as a patron, you collect clients like modern influencers collect followers. These clients, ranging from fellow senators to freedmen, owe you their support. In return, you provide protection, legal aid, or even just a friendly nod in the Senate halls. The more clients you have, the more clout you wield. It's the ancient equivalent of having 1 million Instagram followers, except these followers could actually sway votes. But let's not forget the flip side. As a client, you needed a powerful patron. Think of it as being friends with a celebrity influencer today. Your patron's influence could open doors, or at least help you keep your foot in one. Take Mark Antony, for instance. Before he was a triumvir, he was a loyal client of Julius Caesar, who helped him climb the political ladder. It's like being the sidekick to a superhero, except the superhero occasionally needs you to backstab someone for them. Now, about the costs of running for office. If you thought modern political campaigns were expensive, try financing a Roman one. Running for office was a financial gamble that made Las Vegas look like a penny arcade. You weren't just trying to win votes, you were buying them. Literally. Lavish games, public feasts, and donations were the currency of political favor. In 63 BCE, for instance, the young and ambitious Caesar borrowed enormous sums to fund his candidacy for the position of Pontifex Maximus. It paid off, but the debt was astronomical. Some sources suggest it was around 20 million sestertii. Talk about betting the farm. This financial outlay was necessary because, unlike today's campaigns with their glossy ads and sound bites, a Roman election was all about spectacle. Candidates were expected to throw the kind of parties that would make Gatsby jealous. The more extravagant the games, the more likely you were to win the public's favor. It was like buying a Super Bowl ad, but with more blood and circuses. And there were no refunds if you lost. The stakes were high, but so were the potential rewards if you played your cards, or rather your coins, right. But let's bust a myth while we're at it. The idea that all senators were fabulously wealthy. Sure, some were rolling in sestertii, but others were just as likely to be knee-deep in debt, trying to keep up appearances. In fact, many senators viewed their positions as investments, hoping to recoup their costs through lucrative provincial governorships or other financial opportunities down the line. It's the old adage of spending money to make money, with a distinctly Roman twist. So here you are, juggling alliances like a circus performer, your toga more than just clothing, but a symbol of your rank and ambition. You're navigating a world where every glance, nod, and handshake could mean the difference between political life and death. Keep your friends close, your enemies closer, and always have a backup plan or two. Welcome to the Roman Senate, where survival is the ultimate game, and the rules are constantly changing. Stick with me, and we might just make it out of here with our dignity and our heads intact. Speaking of survival, let's pivot to one of Rome's most critical skills, the art of rhetoric. Imagine stepping into the Forum, surrounded by the architectural grandeur of ancient Rome, with its marble columns and bustling crowd of toga-clad citizens. Your task: deliver a speech that won't just keep you in the game, but elevate you to the political stratosphere. And trust me, it's not as easy as it sounds. This is less TED talk and more verbal gladiatorial combat. Enter Marcus Tullius Cicero, the veritable rock star of Roman rhetoric. If words were weapons, Cicero wielded them with the finesse of a master swordsman. His speeches were legendary, and not just for their eloquence. Cicero had the uncanny ability to turn the tide of public opinion with a well-placed phrase or a devastating rhetorical jab. Born in 106 BCE, Cicero rose from relatively humble beginnings in Arpinum to become one of Rome's greatest orators and a politician who knew his way around the Senate like a seasoned chess player. But here's the kicker. Cicero wasn't just about bombastic speeches and grandiose gestures. He knew the importance of preparation. His speeches were as rehearsed as a Broadway play, complete with strategic pauses and dramatic flair. Cicero understood that in Rome, as in life, perception was everything. A speech wasn't just about the words, it was about the delivery. He crafted his orations with meticulous care, often spending days or even weeks refining them. The myth of the impromptu orator, busted. Think less spontaneous genius and more Shakespearean actor hitting his marks. And then there's Cicero's relationship with Julius Caesar, a tale of political frenemies if there ever was one. On the surface, They were allies, but beneath the veneer of camaraderie lay a complex web of rivalry and mutual suspicion. Cicero admired Caesar's military prowess and political acumen, yet he remained wary of Caesar's ambitions for absolute power. It was a classic case of keep your friends close and your enemies closer, a strategy that served Cicero well until it didn't. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BCE, effectively declaring war on the Senate, Cicero was thrust into a political quagmire that tested his loyalties and his rhetorical skills to the limit. Let's dig a little deeper into why rhetoric was such a big deal. In the Roman Senate, speeches weren't just about persuasion, they were about survival. Senators who could sway their peers with eloquent arguments held the keys to power. A well-delivered speech could make or break alliances, influence legislation, or even decide the fate of political careers. In a society where public perception was king, mastering the art of rhetoric was like holding the ultimate trump card. But here's a reality check. Not all senators were orators of Cicero's caliber. Many relied on ghostwriters or borrowed liberally from the works of others. Plagiarism wasn't just an academic misdemeanor, it was practically a political strategy. And let's not forget the role of theatrics. Senators often employed actors to deliver their speeches with added flair, turning what should have been a serious political discourse into a kind of ancient Roman reality show. It's like hiring a Hollywood star to deliver your campaign speech, flashy, but perhaps lacking in authenticity. Now, while we're on the subject, let's talk about the audience. Roman citizens weren't passive spectators. They were active participants in the political process. They gathered in the forum not just to hear speeches, but to judge them. A senator's ability to connect with the public was crucial. Fail to impress, and you could find yourself laughed out of the very forum you sought to conquer. Imagine trying to give a speech while dodging jeers and catcalls from a crowd that wouldn't hesitate to express its displeasure. It was a tough crowd, to say the least. To add another layer of complexity, speeches were often delivered in Latin, a language as nuanced as it was precise. The right turn of phrase could elevate a speech to the realm of the sublime, while a linguistic misstep could turn it into fodder for ridicule. Senators needed to be linguistic acrobats, balancing complex syntax with rhetorical flourishes that would resonate with their audience. It was a demanding skill set, requiring not just intelligence, but also a deep understanding of human nature. Let's not forget the economic context. Compelling rhetoric was as much a financial investment as a political one. Senators often employed scribes, secretaries, and scholars to help craft their speeches, an expenditure that could rival the costs of an election campaign. The most successful orators were those who understood the value of investing in their public persona, ensuring that their words carried the weight of authority and influence. But wait, there's more. Rhetoric wasn't confined to the Senate. It permeated every aspect of Roman life, from legal battles to military commands. A general who could inspire his troops with a rousing speech was worth his weight in gold. Take Caesar, for instance, who famously rallied his men before the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE with a speech that highlighted their past victories and assured them of their superiority over Pompey's forces. His words were as much a weapon as any sword, cutting through doubt and unifying his soldiers in a shared cause. So, as you navigate the treacherous waters of Roman politics, armed with your trusty toga and a well-prepared speech, remember this: rhetoric is more than just a tool. It's a lifeline, a way to carve out a place in the cutthroat world of the Senate. Whether you're delivering a heartfelt appeal or a biting critique, the power of words can elevate you to new heights or send you crashing back down to earth. The stakes are high, but with the right combination of skill, strategy, and a dash of Cicero's flair, you might just find yourself standing at the pinnacle of Roman political life. And as you weave your way through this intricate tapestry of alliances, rivalries, and rhetorical battles, keep in mind the words of Cicero himself. A room without books is like a body without a soul. In other words, knowledge is power, and in Rome, power was everything. So arm yourself with the tools of the trade, hone your oratorical skills, and prepare to take on the Senate with all the wit and wisdom of Rome's greatest orators. Welcome to the game, and may the odds be ever in your favor. And speaking of high stakes, let's talk about the ultimate political poker game, the scandals and schemes that could make or break a Roman senator. Here, intrigue isn't just a pastime, it's a survival tactic. The Senate, as you might have guessed, wasn't always the dignified assembly of statesmen we sometimes imagine. It was more like a Roman soap opera, complete with backstabbing, bribery, and enough drama to keep the gossip mills spinning faster than a chariot race. First up, let's dive into the infamous Catiline conspiracy of 63 BCE. Picture this: Lucius Sergius Catilina, a senator with a flair for the dramatic and a penchant for the underhanded, plotting to overthrow the Roman government. Catiline was the kind of guy who, if he were around today, would probably have his own reality TV show. Disgruntled by political failures and desperate for power, he hatched a plan as ambitious as it was reckless. His scheme involved a coup d'etat, a blaze of glory that promised to shake the Republic to its core. Now, here's the juicy part. Catiline's conspiracy involved a motley crew of down-and-out senators, debt-ridden aristocrats, and disgruntled veterans, a real who's who of Roman malcontents. They planned arson, murder, and chaos, aiming to seize control of the government. But as is often the case with grand conspiracies, things didn't go quite as planned. Enter our friend Cicero, who, as consul, delivered a series of blistering speeches exposing Catiline's plot. His first oration, delivered with all the flair of a Broadway opening night, famously began with Quousque tandem abuta, Catilina, patientia nostra. How long, O Catiline, will you abuse our patience? Cicero's ability to sway public opinion was nothing short of masterful, and it didn't take long for the Senate to act. Catiline fled Rome, leaving behind a trail of chaos and a few very angry conspirators. In a dramatic climax, Catiline and his followers met their end in a bloody battle at Pistoria. The conspiracy was squashed, but it served as a potent reminder of just how volatile Roman politics could be. It's a tale that would feel right at home in any modern political thriller, complete with intrigue, betrayal, and a dash of poetic justice. Now, if you think that was wild, get this. Bribery and corruption were practically hobbies for some senators. Forget about the romanticized image of noble statesmen. Many were more like wheeler-dealers in togas. Take the case of Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's wealthiest men. Crassus wasn't just rich, he was filthy rich, thanks to a combination of astute investments, property speculation, and some not-so-subtle fire brigades. Yes, you heard that right. Crassus would buy burning buildings at a discount, and then have his private fire brigade put out the flames. Talk about a hot deal. Crassus's wealth allowed him to buy influence like a modern mogul buys sports cars. He was known to bankroll political careers, including that of his more famous ally, Julius Caesar. In this cutthroat environment, a few well-placed bribes could open doors faster than any oration. It was a system that rewarded those who could grease the right palms, and Crassus had a stockpile of olive oil, metaphorically speaking, at the ready. And let's not forget the role of the Vestal Virgins, those paragons of Roman virtue. These women, chosen for their purity and piety, were more than just religious symbols. They were political tools. The Vestals held significant sway in Roman society, able to influence public opinion and protect individuals from the wrath of the state. Their sacred status meant they could intercede on behalf of those accused of crimes, a fact not lost on savvy senators who might find themselves on the wrong side of the law. In one notorious case, a Vestal virgin named Licinia was accused of incestum, a grave charge that could result in a live burial, Rome's ultimate punishment. The scandal rocked the city, but Licinia's case was more than just a legal proceeding. It was a political spectacle. The outcome depended less on evidence and more on the winds of political fortune. In this world, religion and politics were inextricably linked, each influencing the other in a complex dance that could end with a senator's rise or fall. Speaking of religious influence, let's talk about the augurs, Rome's official interpreters of the will of the gods. These priests wielded immense power, capable of validating or invalidating political decisions based on omens. Imagine trying to pass legislation only to be told that the flight pattern of a flock of birds means you'll have to try again tomorrow. It sounds absurd, but in Rome, the divine was never far from the political, and the augurs were the gatekeepers of this celestial approval. But here's a reality check. Not all senators were at the mercy of the gods. Some, like Caesar, famously ignored unfavorable omens when it suited them. In 49 BCE, as he prepared to cross the Rubicon and effectively declare war on Rome, Caesar was warned by augurs that the omens were bad. His response? To cross anyway, uttering the famous phrase, Alia iacta est, the die is cast. It was a bold move that paid off, proving that sometimes fortune favors the audacious. So, as you navigate the treacherous landscape of Roman politics, remember that survival isn't just about playing the game, it's about mastering it. Whether you're bribing your way to the top, uncovering conspiracies, or reading the signs in the sky, the key is to stay one step ahead in a world where the only constant is change. Keep your dagger ready, your toga spotless, and your wits as sharp as Cicero's tongue. Welcome to the Roman Senate, where every day is a new episode in the grand drama of history. The Roman Senate, more like the Hunger Games in togas than a gentleman's club. But as thrilling as it is to climb to the top, every senator eventually faces the inevitable fall. The political arena that once buzzed with your speeches and alliances now becomes a stage for your exit. And let's be honest, exits in Rome rarely involved a gold watch and a gentle nudge into retirement. No, we're talking about exits that make Shakespearean tragedies look like children's bedtime stories. First, let's discuss exile. For many senators, it was the ancient equivalent of being sent to the naughty step, only the step was a remote island or distant province. Take Cicero, our eloquent orator friend. In 58 BCE, he found himself banished to Thessalonica, courtesy of political rivalries gone sour. His crime, overstepping in the Catilinarian conspiracy and executing citizens without a trial. Cicero's exile was more than just a change of scenery. It was a blow to his ego and influence. But as they say, one man's exile is another man's sabbatical. Cicero used this time to write, reflect, and plot his eventual return, because in Roman politics, it's not over until the fat toga sings. Then there's execution, Rome's final curtain call. Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE remains the epitome of a political exit that was both dramatic and bloody. Stabbed 23 times by his peers under the guise of saving the Republic, Caesar's death was less about personal vendetta and more about fear of his rising power. It was a stark reminder that in Rome, the line between hero and tyrant was as thin as a senator's patience during a filibuster. Caesar's demise, however, wasn't just an end, but a catalyst. It set off a chain reaction of power struggles and civil wars that would eventually lead to the rise of the Roman Empire. Talk about leaving a legacy. Now, not every senator met such a theatrical end. Some managed a quieter exit, retreating to the countryside to live out their days away from the Senate's cutthroat politics. Think of it as the Roman version of moving to Florida, minus the golf courses and early bird specials. Lucius Cornelius Sulla, the dictator who reformed Rome with a proverbial iron fist, voluntarily retired in 79 BCE to his estate in Puteoli. He spent his last years writing memoirs and indulging in the pleasures of a life well lived, proving that sometimes stepping away from the spotlight is the wisest move. But don't be fooled. It wasn't all sunshine and olive groves. Sulla's legacy was one of ruthless efficiency, and his reforms left a lasting imprint on Rome's political landscape. As senators plotted their retirements, or were forced into them, they often pondered the same question: how would they be remembered? Securing a legacy was as important as securing a vote. For some, this meant commissioning statues or monuments, literal stones to their achievements. Others wrote memoirs, hoping their words would outlast the marble. Caro the Younger, known for his stoic philosophy and unwavering principles, became a symbol of republican virtue after his suicide in 46 BCE. His opposition to Caesar became legendary, not for its success, but for its steadfastness. Caro's death was less a capitulation and more a final stand for his beliefs. His story, immortalized by later writers, became a rallying cry for those who valued liberty over life. But here's the kicker. Not everyone succeeded in crafting a lasting legacy. For every Cicero or Caesar, there were countless others whose names faded into obscurity. The harsh reality of Roman politics was that history favored the bold, the cunning, and the lucky. Senators who failed to navigate the treacherous waters found their legacies sunk, their stories untold. So, what does all this ancient drama teach us about modern politics? Quite a bit, actually. The Roman Senate, with its intrigue and machinations, set the stage for political systems that would follow. Its emphasis on rhetoric, alliances, and public perception are still relevant in today's political arenas. The patron-client system, with its reliance on networks and influence, mirrors modern lobbying and political endorsements. Even the concept of legacy, how leaders are remembered, continues to shape decisions and actions. If nothing else, Roman history reminds us that some things never change. Power is as intoxicating as it is fleeting, alliances are as fragile as ever, and politics remains a game of strategy, not unlike chess, but with real lives on the line. The lessons from Rome aren't just dusty tales for textbooks. They are reflections of human nature, timeless in their truths, and as relevant today as they were 2 millennia ago. As you close this chapter and reflect on the rise and fall of those toga-clad titans, remember, history doesn't just repeat itself, it echoes, leaving behind a symphony of triumph, tragedy, and timeless lessons. Athens in 469 BC was a bit like a bustling beehive, only instead of honey, it was dripping with politics, philosophy, and the occasional street vendor trying to offload dubious fish. There were no yellow cabs, but plenty of sandals scuffling along the dusty streets, where every corner seemed to harbor a debate, a market deal, or a philosopher in training. Enter young Socrates, a kid who probably would have given standardized tests a run for their money, if they had those back then. Instead, he was the son of Sophroniscus, a stonemason, and Phaenerete, a midwife. Quite the dynamic duo when you think about it. One brought people into the world, the other chiseled their names into history. Now, Socrates wasn't exactly the kind of guy you'd catch with his nose buried in a scroll. No, sir, he was more the type to be caught with a furrowed brow, pondering why we bury our noses in things at all. While some kids were busy memorizing Homer or playing harplight in training, young Socrates had a penchant for asking why the sky was blue. Spoiler alert, he never got a straight answer. But that didn't stop him from questioning everything and everyone around him. Athens was a city of stark contrasts, where democracy was the buzzword, yet women, slaves, and foreigners couldn't vote. Go figure. The economy was a mixed bag too, with its own version of inflation. The price of a loaf of bread could set you back around 2 drachmas. And let's not even talk about the cost of olive oil, an essential for any self-respecting Athenian household. In this environment, Socrates' early years were shaped by a society that valued rhetoric and oratory skills, and where the agora was the place to be if you wanted to see and be seen, or just haggle over the price of figs. You can bet young Socrates was there, soaking it all in, though not necessarily buying. He was more interested in the chatter, the clamor of ideas bouncing off the marble columns, rather than the goods. Social norms in Athens were a curious mix, with strict expectations of citizenship and the ever-important military service looming over every young Athenian male. Yet, Socrates seemed to march to the beat of his own drum, or perhaps more accurately, the silence between the drum beats, questioning the rhythm itself. While others may have focused on achieving greatness through wealth or glory on the battlefield, Socrates seemed more inclined to question what greatness even meant. Was it in the accolades, the coins, the power? Or was it, perhaps, in understanding oneself and others? It's not hard to picture young Socrates as something of a philosophical rebel. Even before he had a beard to stroke thoughtfully, he likely spent less time carving marble and more time chipping away at the bedrock of human understanding. And while he might not have been the teacher's pet, he was certainly the student who kept teachers on their toes, forever challenging the status quo. Socrates' early years in Athens were a foundation for what would become a life dedicated to philosophy, though not in the typical sense. His interest wasn't in crafting elegant prose or becoming a superstar sophist. Instead, he was all about the pursuit of truth, the kind you can't buy for any amount of drachmas. This pursuit would eventually lead him down a path that was as complex as the city itself, a city that was both the cradle of democracy and the setting for his eventual downfall. But for now, young Socrates was just another Athenian kid with a penchant for asking too many questions, living in a city that was as much about the ideals of democracy as it was about the reality of exclusion. In the grand play of Athenian life, he was the oddball who somehow made it all make sense, or at least made everyone stop to think about why it didn't. Socrates had soaked up the Athenian atmosphere like a sponge, and by his middle years, he was wringing out all those philosophical ponderings into something new and audacious, while others in their midlife crisis were eyeing up shiny chariots or the latest in toga fashion, Socrates had a different kind of makeover in mind. Forget the horses. He was hitching his wagon to a star of his own making, philosophy. Now, if ancient Greece had a version of Jeopardy, Socrates would have been both the host and the most annoying contestant. He developed what we now call the Socratic method, a form of dialogue that involves asking a series of questions to draw out ideas and stimulate critical thinking. Picture it as a never-ending queue, and a session where Socrates was less concerned with the answers and more interested in making you question your own understanding. In a society that adored rhetoric and persuasion, this was like turning up to a poetry contest with a blank page and winning anyway. But this wasn't just playful banter. It was a philosophical revolution that ticked off the political elite like a bad batch of olives. You see, Athens was still smarting from the Peloponnesian War, a drawn-out conflict with Sparta that had left the city bruised and battered, like a boxer who'd gone one round too many. The war had cost Athens dearly, both in human lives and drachmas. It was a conflict where victory was as elusive as a straight answer from an oracle, and the aftermath had turned the city into a cauldron of political tension and economic strain. In this charged environment, Socrates' relentless questioning felt less like an intellectual exercise and more like a challenge to authority. Imagine a political climate where everyone's trying to mend fences and Socrates is the guy casually asking why the fences are there in the first place. If democracy was Athens' prized possession, Socrates was the guy shaking it to see what would fall out. And then there was his stint as a soldier. Yes, you heard that right. Socrates, the notorious thinker, once donned armor and took up arms. But if you're picturing him as a swashbuckling hero, sword in one hand and philosophical manuscript in the other, you might want to think again. Socrates, the soldier, was less about swinging swords and more about mental gymnastics. He fought in the Battle of Potidaea, among others, and while he might not have been the most fearsome warrior, he proved his courage in different ways. It's said that during the retreat from the Battle of Delium, Socrates showcased a level of calm that was downright chilling. While others were in full panic mode, he moved with a deliberate stride that probably made his comrades wonder if he'd just popped out for a stroll. He might not have led the charge, but he led by example, showing that sometimes the greatest battles are fought in the mind. His fellow soldiers might have found his philosophical musings a tad annoying when arrows were raining down, but Socrates had a knack for sticking to his principles, even when they weren't the most practical. And perhaps that's why he stood out, not just for his courage, but for his unwavering commitment to questioning everything, from battlefield tactics to the nature of bravery itself. But back in the dusty streets of Athens, Socrates' method was about as popular as a tax collector. His knack for making people look foolish, usually by exposing the gaps in their logic, didn't win him any popularity contests. In fact, it garnered him quite a few enemies among the city's power brokers, who much preferred the status quo to be kept unexamined. Imagine having your ego deflated at every turn by a guy with the scruffiest beard in town. Not exactly the best way to curry favor with the bigwigs. Still, Socrates wasn't in it for the accolades. In an age where sophists charged hefty fees for their lessons, Socrates didn't pocket a single drachma for his teachings. His classroom was the agora, his tuition was free, and his currency was curiosity. He was the anti-sophist, challenging the notion that wisdom was a commodity to be bought and sold. As Athens grappled with its post-war identity, Socrates was there, ever the gadfly, buzzing around the city's conscience. His probing questions and refusal to accept easy answers made him a philosopher for the ages, yet a perennial thorn in the side of those who preferred their truths prepackaged and neatly tied with a bow. While the political elite might have wished he'd just buy a chariot and ride off into the sunset, Socrates remained steadfast, his questions as enduring as the marble columns of the Parthenon. And though he would never see the fruits of his labor in his lifetime, his legacy would echo through the ages, a testament to the idea that sometimes the most profound answers come not from what is said, but from what is asked. As Socrates continued his relentless pursuit of truth in the bustling heart of Athens, he found his stage and his audience in the agora, the city's marketplace and social hub. Picture the agora as a sort of ancient Greek Twitter feed, where everyone from merchants to magistrates aired their opinions, and Socrates was the guy who kept replying with, "But why?" In this arena, Socrates honed his unique brand of public philosophy, engaging folks in debates that made modern online spats look like polite dinner conversation. His method, a relentless barrage of questions that left many Athenians both irritated and intrigued. Imagine a Socratic dialogue as the original heart take, only instead of 280 characters, it was face-to-face and unapologetically intense. Socrates' social life was as unconventional as his philosophy. He wasn't the type to host lavish banquets or curry favor with powerful patrons. Instead, he preferred the company of Athens' youth, believing that their minds were still malleable and open to new ideas. Among his circle of eager young minds was Plato, who would go on to become one of history's most influential philosophers in his own right. Plato was the kind of student who took notes, literally. Much of what we know about Socrates comes from Plato's dialogues, where he often cast his mentor as the star of the philosophical show. But Socrates' influence on the youth wasn't limited to formal teachings. His presence in the agora was like that of a rock star philosopher, attracting a following of young Athenians who were eager to challenge the status quo. And while Socrates was happy to engage with anyone willing to debate, it's safe to say that his knack for exposing logical fallacies wasn't everyone's cup of hemlock. The political elite, in particular, were wary of his growing influence on the next generation, fearing that his radical ideas might undermine their authority. Adding to his mystique was the story of the Oracle of Delphi, the ancient world's heartline to the divine. According to the tale, the oracle proclaimed Socrates the wisest man in Athens. Now, you'd think that'd be a compliment, right? But leave it to Socrates to turn even divine praise into a philosophical conundrum. Socrates famously interpreted the oracle's words not as a testament to his intelligence, but as a riddle. He was the wisest because he knew that he knew nothing. It's the kind of paradox that would have made any Zen master nod in approval. This reputation as the wisest, and yet most confounding, of men only added to his allure. But it also painted a target on his back. In a city still reeling from political upheaval and war, Socrates' penchant for questioning everything was viewed with growing suspicion. His public discourses, while intellectually stimulating, were perceived by some as undermining the traditional values and beliefs that held Athenian society together. Yet, for all his philosophical provocations, Socrates maintained a certain humility. He lived modestly, wore the same threadbare cloak regardless of the season, and went barefoot through the streets of Athens, much to the chagrin of cobblers everywhere. His lifestyle was a living testament to his beliefs, that virtue and wisdom were more valuable than wealth or appearance. And speaking of wealth, let's not forget the economic context of Socrates' Athens. The city was still recovering from the Peloponnesian War, and economic instability was the order of the day. The cost of living was no laughing matter. With inflation affecting everything from grain prices to housing, many Athenians struggled to make ends meet. In such a climate, Socrates' disdain for material wealth was both admirable and deeply confusing to those around him. To Socrates, the pursuit of truth was priceless, even if it couldn't pay the rent. Despite, or perhaps because of, his eccentricities, Socrates left an indelible mark on those who crossed his path. His dialogues with the youth of Athens were more than just intellectual exercises. They were a call to action, encouraging them to question, to think, and to seek understanding in a world that often offered none. But not everyone was a fan. As Socrates' influence grew, so did the number of his detractors. His method of questioning was seen by some as corrosive, a threat to the foundational beliefs of Athenian society. It wasn't just that he was asking questions, it was the kind of questions he was asking. Ones that made people uncomfortable, that forced them to confront the inconsistencies in their own logic and beliefs. And then there was his infamous trial, a spectacle that would make today's courtroom dramas look like child's play. Accused of corrupting the youth and impiety, Socrates found himself at the mercy of a jury of 500 of his fellow citizens. His defense, a fearless declaration of his life's mission to pursue wisdom and truth, no matter the cost. Spoiler alert, it wasn't enough to save him, but we'll leave that drama for later. For now, let's appreciate Socrates as the original disruptor, a man who reveled in the chaos of ideas and wasn't afraid to stir the pot in a society that preferred it undisturbed. His life was a testament to the power of questioning, a reminder that sometimes the most profound insights come not from answers, but from the questions themselves. In the end, Socrates' legacy wasn't just a collection of philosophical musings, but a whole new way of thinking that would ripple through history. His dialogues with the youth, his mind games with an oracle, and his relentless pursuit of truth, even in the face of adversity, cemented his place as the philosophical gadfly of Athens. And while the city may have tried to silence him, his ideas would continue to buzz through the ages, a testament to the enduring power of a well-placed question. So, as Socrates' philosophical musings continue to rattle the cages of Athenian society, we find ourselves at the doorstep of one of history's most infamous trials. Picture it, a courtroom drama that could give any modern legal thriller a run for its drachmas. The year is 399 BC, and Socrates, aged 70 and still as scruffy as ever, is about to face the music. But this isn't just any tune. It's the kind of spectacle where the chorus is composed of 500 Athenian jurors, and the melody is the fate of philosophy's greatest agitator. Now, the charges against Socrates, impiety and corrupting the youth. Basically, the Athenian equivalent of you're making the kids question too much, and the guards aren't thrilled. You see, Socrates had this pesky habit of asking awkward questions that made people squirm, a bit like being called out for not reading the terms and conditions. And in a city still licking its wounds from the Peloponnesian War, a time when stability was more desirable than a peaceful siesta, Socrates' relentless probing was seen as a threat to the fragile status quo. The trial took place in the heart of Athens, with a jury that could rival the size of a small army. We're talking 500 men, not exactly the most intimate of settings for someone fighting for his life. But that's democracy for you, Athenian style, where everyone and their brother could have a say. Unless, of course, you were a woman, slave, or foreigner. Talk about selective inclusivity. Before we dive into the courtroom drama, let's set the stage with some context. Athens' democracy was both a marvel and a mess. Imagine a political system where you could end up with a jury that large, selected by lot, reflecting the idea that every citizen had a stake in justice. Yet this same system could be swayed by rhetoric and persuasion, qualities Socrates was ironically accused of using to lead the youth astray. Socrates, never one to mince words, took his defense into his own hands. No slick-talking lawyer for him. He was his own Perry Mason, minus the briefcase and tailored suit. Instead, he stood before the jury, delivering a defense that was less about saving his own skin and more about championing his life's work. He didn't grovel or beg. Oh no, Socrates went full philosopher, arguing that he was a necessary gadfly for Athens, stirring the city into action, making it think. He famously declared that the unexamined life is not worth living, a statement that sounded more like a philosophical mic drop than a plea for mercy. This wasn't just courtroom bravado. It was a testament to his unwavering commitment to his principles. Socrates' defense was essentially a middle finger to the court, a refusal to back down from his lifelong quest for truth, even if it meant staring down the hemlock. Speaking of hemlock, let's talk consequences. The jury, perhaps not entirely thrilled with Socrates' defiant stance, found him guilty by a margin of 280 to 220. A close call, but no cigar. And in a plot twist that would make any modern legal drama writer salivate, the Athenian legal process allowed the convicted to propose their own punishment. Socrates, cheeky to the last, suggested free meals for life, a reward for his service to the city. If you've ever seen a courtroom gasp, that would have been the moment. Naturally, the jury wasn't amused. In the end, they sentenced Socrates to death by hemlock, a poison cocktail that was as grim as it sounds. But here's where our story takes another twist. Socrates, fully aware of the gravity of his situation, could have escaped. His followers, including the ever-loyal Plato, were ready to whisk him away. But Socrates, sticking to his principles like a philosopher glued to his own rhetoric, refused. To flee would be to betray his own teachings, to turn his back on the very city he sought to enlighten. So, he chose the hemlock, a decision that seems both absurd and heroic, depending on how you look at it. In his final hours, Socrates remained the consummate philosopher, discussing the immortality of the soul and the nature of death with his friends. It's said that he drank the poison calmly, as if sipping a fine Athenian wine, his mind as sharp as ever. Socrates' trial wasn't just a clash of ideas. It was a reflection of the tensions within Athenian society. A city torn between its democratic ideals and the fear of change. A city that celebrated thinkers, yet feared their power to disrupt. In condemning Socrates, Athens perhaps sought to silence the uncomfortable truths he uncovered, preferring the comfort of tradition over the chaos of inquiry. Yet, like any good story, this isn't the end. Socrates' legacy would live on, his ideas continuing to challenge, to provoke, to inspire. His trial, a cautionary tale of the dangers of too much questioning, would become a beacon for those who dared to think differently. And while Socrates may have sipped the hemlock, his spirit, indomitable and eternal, would continue to haunt the annals of history, a testament to the power of the question and the courage of the one who dared to ask it. So, as the dust settled in Athens, and the city returned to its bustling routine, the echoes of Socrates' trial lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The courtroom drama had ended, but the philosophical debates it sparked were just beginning. Athenian society might have tried to put a lid on Socrates' disruptive ideas, but as any good philosopher knows, once a question is out there, it's nearly impossible to stuff it back into the bottle. In the wake of the trial, Athens was left to grapple with the implications of silencing one of its most provocative voices. Socrates' execution was a stark reminder of the delicate balance between free thought and societal order, a tension that would reverberate through the ages. It was a moment that questioned the very essence of Athenian democracy, a system that prided itself on open discourse, yet couldn't quite handle the heat when the questions got too close to the core. And so, as Socrates' influence continued to ripple through the philosophical landscape, his legacy became a torch passed down through generations. His students, most notably Plato, picked up where he left off, ensuring that the Socratic method would not perish with its founder. Plato's academy would become a new epicenter of thought, a place where questions were not just encouraged, but celebrated, a fitting tribute to his mentor's enduring impact. As for Athens, the city would continue to evolve, its streets and agora bustling with the commerce of both goods and ideas. The trial of Socrates remained a cautionary tale, a reminder of the complexities and contradictions inherent in the pursuit of truth. It was a lesson in the power of ideas, a testament to the fact that even in the face of adversity, the quest for understanding is a journey worth undertaking. So, while Socrates may have exited the stage, his dialogue with the world was far from over. His trial, a dramatic chapter in the annals of history, laid the groundwork for centuries of philosophical exploration, a legacy that would inspire countless thinkers to continue asking, but why? And in that simple question lies the heart of Socrates' enduring influence, a reminder that the pursuit of wisdom is an infinite journey, one that challenges us to look beyond the surface and seek the deeper truths that shape our world. And so, with Socrates' courtroom drama fading into the annals of history, the real show was just starting. You see, Socrates pulled off the ultimate plot twist. He became more famous after his death than he ever was in life. Talk about posthumous publicity. It's like that band no one cared about until their lead singer inevitably kicked it, skyrocketing their albums to the top of the charts. Socrates, the philosophical rock star of Athens, was about to go viral in the ancient world. It didn't hurt that he had some pretty solid PR people on his side. Enter Plato and Xenophon. These guys were like the original biographers, turning Socrates into a philosophical superhero. Plato, the devoted disciple, painted Socrates as the star of his dialogues, a kind of philosophical Batman fighting the intellectual crime of ignorance. Through works like The Republic and Phaedo, Plato immortalized Socrates' ideas, casting him as the philosophical Yoda to his own Jedi journey. Meanwhile, Xenophon, the soldier rider, took a slightly different angle, showcasing Socrates as a practical philosopher with everyday wisdom. Both played their part in crafting a legacy that would outlive them all. But let's not get too misty-eyed. The truth is, Socrates was no saint. His relentless questioning was as annoying as a mosquito at a summer picnic. He was the guy who'd ruin a perfectly good dinner party by asking why the chicken crossed the road, and then insisting you didn't really understand the chicken's motivations. Yet, it's this very tendency to challenge assumptions that cements his relevance in today's debate culture. In an era where everyone's got an opinion and a platform to shout it from, Socrates' insistence on critical thinking and questioning remains a breath of fresh, albeit slightly exasperating, air. Now, let's talk economics. Ancient Greece wasn't exactly a utopian paradise. The economy was as volatile as a Twitter feed. Post-war Athens was grappling with a pretty hefty tab, costs that made the price of a modern latte seem like chump change. With drachmas tighter than a Spartan's grip on a spear, the city needed thinkers who could navigate these choppy waters. Socrates' disdain for material wealth might have seemed impractical, but it was a reminder that true value lies in intellectual riches, not coin purses. Politically, Athens was a roller coaster of democracy and demagoguery. Socrates' trial was a wake-up call about the fragility of free speech and the dangers of mob mentality, the kind of lessons that resonate just as loudly today. His death was a sobering reminder that even the most enlightened societies can stumble when fear trumps reason. Yet, Socrates' legacy isn't just about cautionary tales. It's a call to action. His life's work was a masterclass in the art of asking questions, a skill as crucial now as it was then. In a world where sound bites often replace sound reasoning, Socrates' method encourages us to dig deeper, to peel back the layers of assumption and find the truth beneath. It's a legacy that's as much about the journey as the destination, a reminder that the questions are often more important than the answers. But let's not sugarcoat it. Socrates wasn't perfect. He had a knack for poking holes in everyone else's logic while conveniently sidestepping his own. His method could be maddeningly circular, like a philosophical merry-go-round with no exit in sight. Yet, perhaps this endless loop was the point. By refusing to settle for easy answers, he pushed his contemporaries, and us, to keep questioning, to keep thinking, to keep striving for understanding in a world that often resists it. As we wrap up our philosophical sojourn, it's worth reflecting on the myths and the man. Socrates, the scruffy gadfly of Athens, was both a product of his time and a timeless provocateur. He was a man who dared to ask why when everyone else was content with the what. His story is a testament to the power of inquiry, a reminder that the greatest revolutions often begin not with answers, but with questions. In the end, Socrates' life was a paradox, much like his teachings. He was a man who knew that he knew nothing, yet in that nothingness found a universe of questions waiting to be explored. And isn't that the heart of philosophy? The relentless pursuit of understanding, the courage to question the unquestionable, and the wisdom to accept that sometimes the journey itself is the destination. So, as we bid farewell to Socrates, let's raise a metaphorical glass to the man who made questioning a cornerstone of Western thought. His legacy is a challenge to us all, to keep asking, to keep wondering, and to never stop seeking the truth, no matter how elusive it may be. Because in the end, it's not about the answers we find, but the questions we dare to ask. And that, dear listener, is the true measure of a life well lived. The morning sun in Thebes is like a pharaoh's decree, inescapable and blindingly absolute. As you squint against the light, it's clear you're in the heart of New Kingdom Egypt, around 1250 BCE. The air is heavy with the scent of baked earth and the distant murmur of the Nile, which is as much a lifeline as it is a highway for commerce. The city hums with an energy that's as ancient as the pyramids, but as immediate as the crowd bustling around you. Your first task: navigate the social hierarchy that rules this world like a particularly intricate board game. Thebes isn't just a city. It's a living, breathing testament to the power of order and stability. At the top of this societal pyramid, literally and metaphorically, sits the pharaoh. Or should I say, the self-proclaimed demigod on earth, Ramesses Roman II at this time. His word is law, and his presence is as imposing as the colossal statues that bear his likeness. You might think of him as the ultimate boss, whose office you should avoid unless summoned, preferably with good news. Below him, a cascade of titles and roles create a ladder that's more slippery than a Nile crocodile. You've got the viziers, essentially the pharaoh's right-hand men, handling everything from tax collection to diplomatic affairs. Think of them as the ancient equivalents of high-powered executives, except without the luxury of blaming a bad quarter on market fluctuations. If you're a noble, you might find yourself somewhere in the middle of this structure. You might own land and slaves, which is as much a status symbol as it is a logistical nightmare. Manage them well, and you're in the pharaoh's good books. Misstep, and you could find yourself toiling away in disgrace or worse. Now let's talk about the bread and beer of life, literally. The economy here is a fascinating beast, driven by grain and beer. Yes, beer. Surprise. This isn't your Friday night brew. It's a staple, consumed at every meal. A loaf of bread might run you a couple of deben, and a jug of beer is about the same. The deben is the currency of choice, though not in the form of coins. Instead, we're talking about weights in copper or silver. A skilled laborer might earn about 10 deben a month, which means budgeting is not just wise, but necessary if you don't want to end up as hungry as a desert jackal. For the average Egyptian, the cost of living is a constant juggle. Grain is the gold standard here because it's vital for sustenance and trade. A small family might need about 2 sacks of grain a month to keep everyone fed. But don't think you're grabbing this at a local market with a basket over your arm. The granaries are closely guarded, and redistribution happens in a manner that's strictly controlled by the state. You're more likely to receive your share as part of your labor compensation than to buy it outright. Speaking of labor, if you're a craftsman or artisan, your skills are both your livelihood and your ticket to upward mobility. Mastery in carving statues or crafting jewelry can elevate your status a notch or two, but let's not kid ourselves. It's still a long way to the top. Meanwhile, the priests are busy ensuring the gods are appeased, a task as never-ending as the Nile's flow. Temples aren't just spiritual centers, they're economic powerhouses. They own land, employ workers, and even engage in trade. You might think of them as the ancient version of multinational corporations with a divine twist. If you're a priest, you're in a sweet spot, respected, influential, and well-fed. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility, like making sure the sun god Ra rises every day without a hitch. As you wander through Thebes, the stratification is as apparent as the hieroglyphs etched into stone. The scribes, those literate few who can weave magic with papyrus and ink, are revered. Literacy is a rare skill, and these folks have the keys to bureaucracy, a realm as labyrinthine as the myths themselves. They are the ones who keep track of who owes what, how much grain is stored, and which edicts have been proclaimed. In a society obsessed with order, being a scribe is akin to being a gatekeeper of civilization itself. Now let's not forget the slaves, the unseen backbone of the society. Their lot is harsh, their rights virtually non-existent. They build monuments, work the fields, and serve in households, all while being considered property themselves. It's a brutal reminder of the inequality that props up the grandeur and splendor surrounding you. The romantic allure of these ancient wonders often glosses over the blood, sweat, and tears of those who had no choice but to toil away. As the sun climbs higher, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the landscape, you realize that every aspect of life here is a delicate balance of power, survival, and ambition. In Thebes, life is a carefully choreographed dance, with each individual playing their part to maintain the harmony, or chaos, depending on who you ask, of this ancient world. It's a place where tradition is as binding as the sun is relentless, and where the sands of time are as much an enemy as they are a testament to human achievement. So, as you navigate this world, remember that while the allure of ancient Egypt is undeniable, living here would be a whole different ball game. The sun might set on Thebes, but the complexities of its society ensure that the drama never truly ends. The sun might set on Thebes, but the complexities of its society ensure that the drama never truly ends. And nowhere is this drama more palpable than in the heart of Egyptian political life, the pharaoh's court. Picture this, a place where alliances are as fickle as the Nile's annual floods, and power is as intoxicating as the finest wine of the period. Welcome to the ultimate ancient reality show, where every smile might conceal a dagger, and every whisper could be your undoing. The pharaoh's court is a grand theater, and each player is acutely aware of their role, or their potential downfall. At the center of this elaborate stage is the pharaoh, a living god whose whims are law, and whose favor is worth its weight in gold, or, in this case, grain. But don't be fooled by the grandeur and the titles. The pharaoh's life isn't just about lounging in opulent surroundings while being fanned by servants. Nope, it's a high-stakes game of political chess, where every move must be calculated with the precision of a scribe's pen. Speaking of scribes, these guys are the unsung heroes, or villains, depending on your perspective, of the court. They wield the power of the written word in a world where literacy is as rare as rain in the Sahara. Imagine having the ability to shape reality with a few strokes of a reed pen. They're the ones who record decrees, keep financial records, and draft the endless stream of correspondence that flows through the halls of power. They aren't just passive observers, they're active participants in the political game. Now let's talk about the viziers, the pharaoh's right-hand men who oversee everything from tax collection to the administration of justice. Think of them as the ancient Egyptian equivalent of a prime minister, minus the democratic elections, of course. 2 viziers cover Upper and Lower Egypt, and their influence is as vast as the territories they manage. They have the unenviable task of balancing the needs of the state with the whims of the pharaoh, a juggling act that requires the skills of a seasoned diplomat and the patience of a saint. One wrong move, and you could find yourself on the sharp end of a political stick, or worse, out of favor, which in this environment may as well be a death sentence. But wait, there's more. Let's not forget the priests, those ethereal figures draped in white linen, who wield both spiritual and temporal power. Temples in Egypt aren't just places of worship. They're economic powerhouses, owning vast lands and employing thousands. The priests are the gatekeepers of the divine, tasked with keeping the gods appeased and the pharaoh's divine right to rule intact. But here's the kicker. They're also deeply enmeshed in politics, often acting as advisors or, let's be real, puppet masters behind the scenes. Power in Egypt is about maintaining cosmic order, and the priests are the ones who ensure the universe doesn't fall apart, or at least, that's what they'd like you to believe. The court is also a hotbed of intrigue, where familial ties and personal loyalties can be as treacherous as a cobra's bite. Political alliances are formed and dissolved with dizzying speed. Marriages are strategic, meant to bond powerful families, but they can just as easily become the fuse to a powder keg. It's a delicate dance of power, and one misstep can send you plummeting from grace faster than you can say papyrus. Speaking of papyrus, let's debunk some myths, shall we? Popular culture loves to paint ancient Egypt as a land of eternal harmony and static splendor, where the pharaohs ruled unchallenged. But the truth is as gritty as the sand under your sandals. Political missteps are costly, often leading to exile or execution. Even a misplaced word can turn you from a trusted advisor to persona non grata. The court is a crucible where reputations are forged and shattered, all under the watchful eyes of those who would gladly take your place. And if you think you just sit this one out, think again. In a society where the personal is political, even the smallest players can shift the tides of fortune. Your standing in this world is as much about who you know as it is about what you do. The stakes are high, and the consequences of failure are as permanent as the hieroglyphs carved into stone. In this world, there's no room for complacency. Every ceremony, every feast, every simple gesture is laden with meaning and potential peril. A nod from the pharaoh can elevate you, while a frown can doom you. Even the gods aren't immune to the whims of politics, often invoked to justify a ruler's decisions or to placate an angry populace. So, as you navigate the treacherous waters of ancient Egyptian politics, remember that the allure of power is as seductive as the music that fills the court's grand halls. Yet, beneath the surface, where opulence meets ambition, lies a world as complex and dangerous as any modern political drama. Only this one comes with hieroglyphics and pyramids. Court is a place where history is made, and where the sands of time are as much a witness to human folly as they are to human achievement. As the midday sun reaches its zenith, casting a relentless glare over the sands of Thebes, let's slip into a world where gods walk among mortals, or so the story goes. The religious fervor in ancient Egypt is nothing short of electric, a live wire that powers every aspect of life from the harvest of grain to the halls of justice. Now, before you dismiss these sacred tales as mere bedtime stories for the ancient kids, let's dive into how these myths wielded real-world power. First up in our divine lineup is Ra, the sun god who's not just about brightening your day. Ra is the cosmic VIP, the celestial CEO, if you will, whose daily journey across the sky is as predictable as the taxes do every harvest season. The Egyptians believed Ra's relentless voyage in his solar bark was essential to maintaining Mad, the divine order. And trust me, you didn't want to mess with Mad. It was considered as sacred as a royal decree. Ra's mythology wasn't just for kicks. It had a profound impact on agriculture. Farmers meticulously timed their planting and harvesting to Ra's glorious path, aligning their lives with celestial events. This divine schedule ensures that when Ra shines his approval, crops flourish. It's like having a cosmic gardener on retainer, but without the pesky HOA fees. But not all gods were about sunshine and rainbows. Enter Osiris, the god of the afterlife, whose myth is more tangled than a cat's cradle. Osiris's story is a soap opera of divine proportions, murdered by his brother Set, resurrected by his wife Isis, and ruling the underworld with a wisdom that pharaohs sought to emulate. Osiris was the ultimate comeback kid, and his tale was a lesson in justice and rebirth that resonated deeply with the Egyptian people. Now, Osiris didn't just haunt the underworld, he had a hand in the legal proceedings of the living. The concept of judgment after death, where your heart is weighed against the feather of Mad, had earthly implications. It was like the ultimate review board. Pass, and you get eternal bliss. Fail, and you're a snack for Amit, the devourer of souls. This moral framework encouraged justice and truth in everyday dealings, making Osiris a silent partner in every courtroom. But let's not get too starry-eyed. The priesthood, the self-appointed middlemen between gods and mortals, were the real power players here. Temples were more than places of worship. They were the Wall Street of ancient Egypt. With vast estates and a workforce that could rival any modern corporation, these temples had their fingers in every economic pie. They were the ancient equivalent of a Fortune 500 company, with priests in the role of CEOs and CFOs. This temple-based economy was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provided jobs, food, and security to countless Egyptians. On the other, it concentrated power in the hands of a few, creating a priestly class that could sway political decisions like a well-timed bribe. The priests were the ultimate spin doctors, using divine PR to justify their influence and wealth. Need to justify a tax increase? Blame it on a divine mandate. Want to build another temple? Claim it's Ra's will. And speaking of divine mandates, let's debunk a myth or two. The romantic notion of a unified, harmonious Egypt where everyone knew their place under a benevolent sun is as shimmering as a desert mirage. The truth, religious dogma, was often a tool for control, a way to keep the social hierarchy as rigid as the pyramids themselves. The gods might have promised prosperity and eternal life, but only if you played by the rules set by those who claimed to be their earthly representatives. The average Joe, or perhaps we should say, the average Jaffa kid, was often at the mercy of this religious machine. Farmers handed over a portion of their harvest to the temples. Craftsmen donated their wares, and even the laborers, the backbone of Egypt's grandeur, toiled in the name of the gods. It was a system that offered spiritual security at a cost, your autonomy. Yet the myths themselves were undeniably alluring. Who wouldn't want to believe in a pantheon of gods who could bless your fields, protect your home, and guide you to an afterlife as lush as the Nile Delta? It's the ultimate insurance policy, with premiums paid in offerings and faith. In this divine dance, the priests played their part with masterful skill, ensuring that the gods' favor, and by extension, the priesthood's power, remained unchallenged. But beneath the incense and the hymns lay a stark reality. Religious fervor was as much about reinforcing the status quo as it was about spiritual enlightenment. So as you wander through the temple's shadowed halls, remember this. While the gods may have been eternal, the human desire for power and control is as old as the stones beneath your feet. The sands of Thebes may shift with the wind, but the complexity of its religious and political landscape ensures that the story is far from over. In this world, faith isn't just a personal belief. It's a currency as potent as any deben of silver. And as the midday sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the temple walls, you realize that the divine drama of ancient Egypt is as compelling today as it was millennia ago, a testament to the enduring power of myth and the human penchant for weaving stories as grand as the sky itself. The stage is set, but the final act is yet to come. Stay tuned, because in the world of the ancients, the gods may have had the last word, but history always has a few surprises up its sleeve. As the sun lazily slides down the sky, casting that golden hue only seen in dreams and Hollywood movies, you're about to step into the vibrant tapestry of Egyptian art and entertainment, a realm where the mythical meets the mundane, and the ordinary is anything but. If you ever wanted to witness human ingenuity in its rawest form, buckle up. We're diving into the crafts and trades that made Egypt's grandeur possible. So, you're thinking pyramids, right? Those colossal triangles that scream ancient aliens to some and architectural genius to the rest of us. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we raise stones the size of modern SUVs, let's talk about the unsung heroes, the artisans and laborers. These folks are the real MVPs, and their chisel marks are the fingerprints they left on history. Stone carving in Egypt was like the rock concert of its day. Pun intended. Imagine an army of workers, each wielding a copper chisel, hammering away at limestone and granite. The precision needed, mind-boggling. You're looking at a workload where a single statue could take months or even years to perfect. Yet these artisans weren't just bashing rocks. They were sculpting eternity. They'd carve intricate hieroglyphs and detailed depictions of gods, pharaohs, and everyday life, all with the finesse of a modern Michelangelo, but with fewer tantrums, we hope. And speaking of Michelangelo, let's talk logistics. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, was built with about 3 million blocks of stone, each weighing between 5 and 15 tons. That's heavier than your average T-Rex, and these guys didn't have cranes or forklifts. Instead, they used sleds and manpower, lots of manpower. It's estimated that a workforce of around 20,000 to 30,000 laborers was required. Not slaves as Hollywood might have you believe, but skilled workers who were compensated with food, beer, and shelter. It was a labor contract as binding as the stones themselves. Now, let's pivot to papyrus making, because what's an ancient civilization without its Instagram? Papyrus was the medium of choice for scribes, a precursor to paper that was as essential as a smartphone in today's world. Crafting papyrus was no small feat either. It involved slicing the papyrus plant into thin strips, soaking them, and then pressing them together in crisscross layers. Once dried, these sheets were polished. Voila, your ancient notepad. Papyrus was so valuable that it became an export commodity, traded across the Mediterranean. Let's not forget the economic muscle required to support all this creativity. Craftsmanship was a cornerstone of the Egyptian economy, and skilled artisans were like the tech innovators of their time. Their work didn't just decorate palaces and tombs. It was a critical part of the economy, driving trade and innovation. These were the Silicon Valley startups of the ancient world, minus the hoodies and gluten-free snacks. Now, while the elite commissioned grandiose tombs adorned with gold and intricate carvings, the common folk engaged in simpler pastimes, daily leisure activities. Think board games like Senet, which was basically ancient Egypt's version of chess, but with more existential dread, as losing could symbolize a rough afterlife. Music was another staple, with harps and flutes providing the soundtrack to life's ups and downs. Who needs Spotify when you've got live music by the Nile? But let's dig into the divide between the haves and the have-nots, shall we? The pharaohs and nobles lived in a world of opulence. Their homes were adorned with fine linens, their tables loaded with delicacies like figs, honey, and wine. Meanwhile, the average Egyptian made do with bread, onions, and the occasional piece of fish. It's like the difference between dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant versus grabbing a hot dog from a street cart. Both satisfy hunger, but only one comes with a side of social prestige. And what about entertainment? For the elite, festivities involved elaborate banquets with enough food to make a Roman orgy look like a modest affair. These gatherings were not just about feasting. They were political theaters where alliances were forged and rivalries simmered beneath the surface. Picture a Game of Thrones dinner party, but with fewer dragons and more eyeliner. For the common people, life was simpler but no less rich in joy. They played games, sang songs, and shared stories as old as the Nile itself. Their leisure activities might not have been as grand, but they were steeped in community spirit. It's a reminder that while the elite might have had the gold, the people had something arguably more precious, a sense of belonging. So, as you walk through this world of art and entertainment, remember that the allure of Egypt's grandeur is as much about the people who crafted it as it is about the monuments they left behind. The artisans, the laborers, the scribes, they all wove a tapestry that's as complex as the hieroglyphs they carved. It's a world where every chisel mark, every brushstroke, and every strip of papyrus tells a story of human ambition and creativity. And just as the sun begins to cast its final glow over the sands of Thebes, you realize that the heart of Egyptian culture beats on in the art and entertainment that defined an era. It's a testament to human ingenuity and the eternal quest for legacy. But hold tight, because the story of ancient Egypt is far from over, and the night promises its own share of secrets and revelations. Stay tuned for the final chapters of this epic journey, where every shadow holds a tale, and every whisper echoes through the corridors of time. As the stars begin to twinkle over the vast, silent expanse of Thebes, it's time to peel back the glossy veneer of ancient Egyptian life and grapple with its gritty truths. Sure, the pharaohs and their grandiose tombs have captured imaginations for millennia, but let's not get carried away with the romance of it all. The reality of ancient Egypt was a bit like one of those movie sets, stunning from the front, but a lot of scaffolding and sandbags propping it up from behind. For starters, hieroglyphs and pyramids aside, life in this civilization was as grueling as a modern-day boot camp. You had the scorching sun beating down on you, taxes that could make a modern IRS agent blush, and a social hierarchy that was more rigid than a pharaoh's jawline. Let's be real. You need to navigate a labyrinth of social norms, religious obligations, and political machinations just to make it through your first day. Let's take a reality check on the romantic myth of a perfectly harmonious society. Ancient Egypt is often depicted as a well-oiled machine where everyone knew their place and the guards ensured order. In truth, it was more like a precarious balancing act. Political intrigue ran rampant, with court life resembling an episode of Survivor, where alliances were fickle, and the stakes, your life or freedom, were sky-high. The pharaohs were as much politicians as they were divine rulers, forever juggling the demands of the guards, the nobility, and the populace. Picture trying to keep a three-ring circus in check while riding a unicycle. That's pharaonic governance for you. And while we're myth-busting, let's tackle the idea of the benevolent pharaoh. Sure, they were seen as gods on earth, but that didn't mean they were above the occasional human blunder or tyrannical outburst. After all, Ramses Roman II may have erected countless statues in his honor, but let's not pretend he didn't also wage wars that drained the treasury faster than you can say Tutankhamun. The reality is that even divine rulers had to deal with the messiness of human politics. Now, consider how this ancient society would view our modern world. They might be baffled by our obsession with the individual, given their collective approach to life and afterlife. Our democratic ideals would probably seem as alien as the concept of a weekend, something they clearly didn't indulge in. Yet, they'd likely marvel at our technological advancements, perhaps seeing our smartphones as miniature amulets channeling divine knowledge. But would they trade their hieroglyphs for emojis? Unlikely. They'd probably see them as a downgrade in complex communication. Flip the script, and what about us trying to hack it in their world? Let's face it, most of us wouldn't last till lunchtime. You'd wake up to the sound of donkeys instead of your smartphone alarm, spend your morning bartering at the marketplace with Carpe Debun, and your afternoon avoiding the wrath of a scribe who caught your misspelling of Heruer on a papyrus scroll. The ancient Egyptians weren't just builders of monuments. They constructed an entire way of life that demanded constant vigilance, adaptability, and reverence for the unseen forces they believed guided their existence. Modern conveniences like running water, electricity, and antibiotics would be a mirage on the Nile. We're talking about a world where a toothache could be your undoing, and a bad flood could mean famine. The Nile's annual inundation, while a blessing, was as unpredictable as a politician's promise, dictating whether you'd feast or famine. Yet, despite their hardships, the Egyptians left behind a legacy that has endured for thousands of years. Their grasp of architecture, art, and astronomy was nothing short of genius. They were the original timekeepers, dividing the year into 365 days long before the Gregorian calendar came along to claim credit. Their medical practices, documented on papyri, laid the groundwork for modern medicine. And let's not forget their penchant for record-keeping, which gives us a window into their world that's clearer than any Instagram story. So, what can we take from this ancient civilization, aside from a killer Halloween costume idea? For one, the Egyptians remind us of the power of legacy. They were obsessed with immortality, not just in the spiritual sense, but in a way that echoes through their monuments and writings. They understood that while humans are ephemeral, their creations can transcend time. It's a lesson in leaving something behind that speaks to who we are and what we value. Moreover, their society underscores the value of balance. Whether it was balancing the demands of the gods with the needs of the people, or managing the delicate dance between the flood and the desert, the Egyptians knew that equilibrium was key to survival. It's a lesson that resonates today in our fast-paced, often unbalanced lives. As the full moon casts its glow over the pyramids, those eternal sentinels of history, we're left with the realization that while times have changed, the essence of what drives humanity remains remarkably constant. The desire for knowledge, the quest for stability, and the need for connection. These are as old as the Nile and as enduring as the stars above. So there you have it. Ancient Egypt may have been a land of contradictions and complexities, but it's also a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. As you drift off to sleep, let the sands of time remind you that while civilizations rise and fall, the stories they tell linger, whispering their secrets to those who dare to listen. Because in the end, the history of ancient Egypt is not just a tale of pharaohs and pyramids. It's a reflection of the human spirit, eternal and unyielding, carved in stone and written in the stars.